Enough is enough. You've been talking about it, praying about it, planning it, but you haven't been doing it. And I'm not here to motivate you. I'm here to wake you up. See, the problem isn't that you don't have potential. The problem is you keep starting like an amateur and quitting like it's optional. Let me tell you something. Average people stop when they get tired. Champions stop when they're done. You said this was your year. You said you were tired of being tired. You said you wanted more for your family, your future, your legacy. But wanting it ain't up. You got wanting like you want to breathe. When the alarm goes off and you hit snooze, that's your dream begging you not to quit. When it gets hard, that's life asking you how bad you really want it. When nobody is clapping, that's when champions are made. This is the year you stop negotiating with weakness. No more. I'll stop one day. I'll do it when I feel ready. I'm waiting on motivation. Motivation doesn't come first. Discipline does. You don't need a new plan. You need a new standard. You owe it to the younger version of you who had nothing but a dream. You owe it to the older version of you who doesn't want regret. You owe it to everyone watching you quit silently. This is the year you finish the book, build the business, lose the weight, graduate, heal, execute, no more dabbling. No more halfway. No more excuses dressed up as logic. Pain is temporary. Quitting lasts forever. So when it hurts, smile. When you're tired, dig deeper. When you feel like stopping, remember why you started. Because this is not just another year. This is the year you stop playing with your destiny. This is the year you become obsessed. This is the year you finish. Say it with me. Enough is enough. This is the year I finish what I started. Let me be real with you for a moment. Not polite real, not social media caption real. I mean uncomfortable. Look yourself in the mirror real. Because at some point, somebody has to tell you the truth. Today, there's somebody is me. Enough talking. Execution time. You mastered the art of talking. You can talk your dream like a professional. You can explain your vision in detail. You can tell people what you're going to do, what you're planning to do, what you're working on. You can break it down, dress it up, spiritualize it, intellectualize it, and justify it. But talking doesn't change your life. Talking doesn't move the needle. Talking doesn't put food on the table, doesn't build the business, doesn't finish the degree, doesn't transform the body. Execution does. At some point, you've got to stop announcing and start accomplishing. See, talking feels productive. That's the trap. Talking gives you the same emotional hit as progress without requiring a sacrifice. You tell somebody your plan and they say, oh man, that's powerful. And for a moment, you feel like you've already done the work, but you haven't. You just borrowed the feeling of success without paying the price. And eventually, reality always comes to collect. You don't need another conversation about what you could do. You need a day where you actually did something. Because the world doesn't reward intention. It rewards results. Let me say that again slowly because somebody needs it to sink in. The world does not care what you meant to do. It cares what you delivered. Nobody gives trophies for almost. Nobody hands out championships for potential. Nobody pays you for effort that did produce value. Execution is the only language results understand. And here's the hard part. Execution is lonely. When you're talking, people are around. They're listening, nodding, encouraging, debating, engaging. But when it's time to execute, it's just you and the work. No applause, no comments, no validation. Just discipline, just consistency, just showing up when you don't feel like it. That's why most people talk. Talking is safe. Execution is risky. Talking keeps your ego intact. Execution exposes you. Because once you execute, there's something to evaluate. There's something that can fail. There's something that can be criticized. And a lot of people would rather protect their image than fulfill their assignment. But hear me clearly. You cannot protect your image and chase greatness at the same time. One of them has to go. Execution demands humility. It demands that you accept being bad before you're good. That you accept slow progress. That you accept mistakes, setbacks, and learning curves. Talking lets you stay perfect in theory. Execution forces you to deal with who you actually are. And that's where growth lives. You've been in planning mode too long. Research mode too long. Preparation mode too long. Too long, you keep saying, I'm just getting ready. But readiness is revealed in movement. You don't get ready and then go, you go, and you get ready along the way. Most breakthroughs don't come from perfect plans. They come from imperfect action taken consistently. Let me challenge you. How many notebooks do you have filled with ideas you never executed? How many voice notes? How many saved drafts? How many half-built projects, half-written books, half-started routines? You're surrounded by evidence of your ability to begin. What's missing is the discipline to finish. And the difference between beginners and professionals isn't talent, it's follow-through. Professionals execute even when it's boring, even when it's repetitive, even when the excitement wears off. Beginners wait for the feeling. Professionals rely on commitment. You keep waiting to feel ready, feel motivated, feel confident, but feelings are unreliable employees. They show up late, leave early, and disappear under pressure. If your life is built on how you feel, your results will always be inconsistent. Execution doesn't care how you feel. Execution cares about what you do. Some of you are addicted to information. You think the next video, the next book, the next podcast is going to unlock something magical. But information without application is just entertainment. You don't need more knowledge. You need more courage to act on what you already know. You already know what time you should wake up. You already know what you should stop eating. You already know what habits are holding you back. You already know what work you've been avoiding. So why aren't you doing it? Because execution requires you to give up comfort. And comfort has been your drug. Comfort lets you delay. Comfort lets you rationalize. Comfort lets you convince yourself that tomorrow is guaranteed. But comfort is expensive. It costs you time. It costs you momentum. It costs you your egg. And eventually it costs you your dream. Execution, on the other hand, costs you comfort up front. But it pays you freedom later. You can pay now or pay later. Either way, you're going to pay. Let me tell you something nobody wants to hear. Nobody is coming to hold you accountable the way your future will. One day you're going to look back at this season and you'll either thank yourself for executing or resent yourself for hesitating. And the scary part, that day is coming whether you move or not. You don't rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your system. Execution is about building systems that work even when motivation doesn't. It's about routines that remove decision-making. It's about habits that make progress automatic. Because the more you debate, the less you do. Execution is deciding once and acting daily. No more renegotiating the same promises with yourself every morning. No more asking or should I? You already decided. Now you execute. And execution isn't dramatic. That's another lie people believe. They think execution looks like a movie montage. It doesn't. It looks like showing up on time, doing the reps, making the call, writing the page, sending the email, training when it's quiet, studying when nobody's watching. Execution is boring, and that's why it works. People who win aren't doing extraordinary things once in a while. They're doing ordinary things extraordinarily well, over and over again. Let me say this to the part of you that keeps overthinking. Clarity comes from action, not contemplation. You don't think your way into execution. You execute your way into clarity. The path reveals itself when you start walking. Stop asking for confidence. Stop asking through evidence. And evidence comes from action. Every time you execute, even imperfectly, you cast a vote for the person you're becoming. Every rep matters. Every decision matters more than you think. And don't get it twisted. Execution doesn't mean non-stop grinding with no strategy. It means focused effort on what actually moves the needle. Busy isn't the same as productive. Execution is about priorities. Then I find the few actions that produce the most results and committing to them relentlessly. Talkers love complexity. Executives love simplicity. What's the one thing I need to do today to move forward? And then you do it. Not 10 things, not 50 things. One thing done with excellence, and then you repeat. That's how momentum is built. Not through hype, but through consistency. Some of you are waiting for permission. You don't need it. Some of you are waiting for support. You may not get it. Some of you are waiting for the perfect condition. They don't exist. Execution is choosing to move anyway. Even scared, even unsure, even tired. Courage isn't the absence of fear, it's action in spite of it. And here's the truth. Nobody claps for. Execution will cost you relationships with people who were comfortable with the old you. When you stop talking and start doing, you change the dynamic. Your discipline will make some people uncomfortable. Your consistency will expose their excuses. And instead of rising, they'll try to pull you back into conversation. Stay focused. You don't owe everyone an explanation. You owe yourself results. Let your work speak. Let your consistency speak. Let your progress speak. At some point, talking becomes unnecessary when the results are undeniable. Execution builds a reputation that words never can. And remember this, unfinished work drains energy. Every open loop in your life, every promise you haven't kept to yourself, creates mental weight. Execution closes loops. It frees your mind. It builds self-trust. Because every time you do what you said you would do, you reinforce your identity. You become someone who can be counted on by others, but more importantly, by yourself. And that's power. So stop rehearsing the speech. Stop refining the plan. Stop waiting for the sign. You are the sign. Enough talking. It's execution time. Not everybody keeps telling you how much potential you have. Teacher said, coaches said it, family said it, friends said it. You've been labeled a gifted, a talented, a special for so long that you started believing potential was a guarantee. But let me tell you something that might hurt a little. Potential doesn't owe you anything. Potential will sit there unused your entire life if you don't put discipline behind it. Potential is a promise, not a result. And promises don't mean a thing if nobody shows up to keep them. You were born with ability, sure, but ability is neutral. It doesn't care if you win or lose. It doesn't care if you succeed or fail. Ability just exists. Discipline is what gives ability direction. Discipline is what wakes potential up in the morning and forces it to work when it would rather sleep. Without discipline, potential becomes nothing more than a story people tell about what you could have been. And that's one of the most painful legacies a human being can leave behind. See, potential feels good because it lets you live in the future without pain in the present. You can imagine success without enduring sacrifice. You can talk about greatness without sweating for it, and the world will even encourage you for a while because everyone loves a gifted person who hasn't been tested yet. But eventually, time exposes everybody. At some point, life stops asking what you could do and starts demanding what you did. Discipline is what bridges that gap. Discipline is not punishment. Discipline is not restriction. Discipline is structure. Discipline is saying, I don't feel like it, but I'm doing it anyway. Discipline is choosing what you want most over what you want now. And most people don't fail because they lack talent. They fail because they lack the discipline to repeat the boring, uncomfortable actions that turn talent into results. You've seen it before. The most talented person in the room who never quite makes it. The athlete who had all the physical gifts but didn't train. The student who was smart but never studied. The creative who had ideas for days but never executed. Talent made them noticeable. Discipline would have made them unstoppable. But talent without discipline is dangerous because it lies to you. It tells you that you can turn it on later. It tells you that you don't have to work as hard. It tells you that you'll catch up when it matters. And then one day it matters. And you're not ready. Discipline doesn't lie. Discipline tells you the truth every day. It tells you where you're weak. It tells you where you're inconsistent. It tells you exactly what needs to be fixed. And most people don't like discipline because discipline holds up a mirror you can't edit. But that mirror is where growth starts. Let me say this clearly. The world is full of disciplined people with average talent who are outperforming undisciplined people with extraordinary talents every single day in every field because discipline compounds. Small actions repeated daily create momentum that raw talent can't compete with. Discipline turns effort into habit. Habit turns action into identity. You don't rise because you're gifted. You rise because you're consistent. And discipline is not about being perfect. It's about being predictable. It's about showing up even when you're off, especially when you're off. Because potential shines on your best days, but discipline carries you through your worst ones. Anybody can look good when they feel good. Discipline shows up when you're tired, frustrated, discouraged, or bored. And boredom is the real enemy, not fear, not failure. Because once the excitement fades, only discipline keeps you moving. That's why so many people start strong and finish nowhere. Discipline is also deeply personal. You can't borrow it. You can't outsource it. You can't fake it long term. You either have it or you don't, you know? And if you don't, you can build it, but only through repeated action, not motivation. Motivation is emotional. Discipline is intentional. Motivation shows up when things are new. Discipline shows up when things are routine. You don't become disciplined by waiting to feel disciplined. You become disciplined by doing disciplined things before it feels natural, before it feels comfortable, before it feels rewarding. At first, discipline feels like resistance, like friction, like loss. But what you're really losing is the version of you that relied on excuses. And excuses love potential. Excuses say, if I really tried, I'd be great. Discipline says, try. Let's see. Excuses protect your ego. Discipline builds your future. You have to understand this. Discipline is a form of self-respect. It's you telling yourself, I matter enough to do the hard thing. Every time you skip what you said you would do, you teach yourself that your word doesn't matter. And once you stop trusting yourself, everything else falls apart. Discipline restores trust with yourself. That's why it changes people at a deeper level than success ever could. You can't outdream your habits. You can't visualize your way past inconsistency. You can't manifest what you refuse to practice. Discipline is a daily proof that you're serious about your life. And discipline doesn't require intensity. It requires repetition. Most people think discipline means going hard once in a while. No, discipline means going steady all the time. It's not about doing everything. It's about doing the right things, even when nobody is watching. Especially when nobody is watching. Potential loves attention. Discipline thrives in silence. The work that transforms you rarely gets applause. It happens early in the morning, late at night, when nobody is checking on you, when nobody is impressed. That's why discipline is rare, because it asks you to be committed without being celebrated. But hear this. If you're disciplined long enough, celebration eventually finds you. The problem is most people quit in the quiet season. Discipline also forces you to confront your priorities, because time will always expose what matters to you. You say you have potential, but where is your time going? You say you want more, but where is your energy going? Discipline aligns your daily behavior with your long-term vision. If your actions don't match your ambitions, discipline is missing. And discipline isn't dramatic. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't post every move. It just shows up and does the work over and over again. That's why disciplined people look unlucky to the undisciplined. What you call luck is just consistency you didn't see. You don't need more belief in yourself. You need more structure in your life. Structure creates freedom. Discipline creates options. The more disciplined you are, the more control you have over your future. The less disciplined you are, the more your life is controlled by moods, circumstances, and other people. Undisciplined potential is fragile. One bad week can derail it. Disciplined progress is resilient. It absorbs setbacks and keeps moving. And let me be honest with you, discipline will cost you. It will cost you comfort. It will cost you spontaneity. It will cost you some relationships. But undisciplined potential will cost you your peace. It will cost you your confidence. It will cost you years you can't get back. One is painful now. The other is painful later. Choose your pain, because the truth is potential expires, not always but slowly. Every year you don't use it, it dulls. Every time you choose convenience over commitment, it weakens. Until one day you don't even feel anymore, just the regret of what never became. Discipline keeps potential alive, not by making life easier, but by making progress inevitable. And the moment you stop romanticizing your potential and start respecting discipline is the moment your life actually begins to change. You've proven you can start. That's not the issue. You start fast. You start fast. You start excited. Notebook, new plan, new routine, new energy. Day one feels amazing. Day two feels possible. Day three feels optional. And somewhere between inconvenience and discomfort, you disappear. Not physically, you're still there. But mentally, emotionally, spiritually, you checked out. Stop starting, start finishing. Yeah. Because beginnings don't change lives. Endings do. Anybody can start when motivation is high and the vision is clear. Starting is easy because it's fueled by hope. Finishing is hard because it's fueled by responsibility. And responsibility requires a level of maturity most people avoid. It demands that you show up after the excitement is gone, after the praise stops, after the results take longer than you expected. You love the feeling of new goals, new ideas, new seasons, but you've confused novelty with progress. Just because something feels fresh doesn't mean it's effective. Just because you're busy beginning doesn't mean you're moving forward. Starting is an emotional decision. Finishing is a character decision. And character is revealed when nobody's cheering anymore. You don't lack ideas. You lack endurance. You lack endurance. You don't lack vision. You lack patience. You don't lack ability. You lack follow through. Every unfinished thing in your life is quietly draining you. It's taking up mental space, emotional energy, confidence. Every time you don't finish what you start, you teach yourself that your word is negotiable, that promises are flexible, that quitting is an option when it gets uncomfortable. And over time, that becomes your identity. You become someone who begins with passion and ends with excuses. And the dangerous part, people start expecting it. They stop holding you accountable because they've seen this movie before. You talk big, start strong, fade out quietly, then come back with another new idea like nothing happened. But inside, it's wearing on you because unfinished work creates unfinished confidence. You don't trust yourself anymore, and you might not even realize it. You hype yourself up publicly, but privately you doubt whether you'll actually follow through. And that doubt doesn't come from lack of talent. It comes from a track record of quitting. Finishing builds trust with yourself. And without self-trust, nothing else works. Here's the truth. Finishing is not about skill. It's about tolerance. Tolerance for boredom. Tolerance for frustration. Tolerance for slow progress. Tolerance for doing the same thing longer than you want to. Most people quit not because it's impossible, but because it's inconvenient. The work didn't stop being effective, it stopped being exciting. And excitement is a terrible foundation for discipline. You started that project because it felt good. You quit because it stopped feeling good. But feelings are terrible leaders. They change with weather, mood, sleep, and circumstances. If your life is led by how you feel, your results will always be inconsistent. Finish what you start means you do what you said you would do even when you don't feel like it. Especially when you don't feel like it. Because that's when it actually counts. Let's talk about the middle. The most ignored part of every journey. Not the beginning, not the finish line, but the long, quiet, messy middle. The middle is where routines replace excitement, where progress slows down, where results aren't visible yet, where doubt gets loud. That's where most people quit. Not at the start. In the middle. Because the middle doesn't get applause. It doesn't get recognition. It doesn't get validation. It just gets work. And finishing requires you to make peace with the middle. You don't quit because you can't finish. You quit because you've never trained yourself to stay. You leave when it gets hard. You leave when it gets repetitive. You leave when it gets lonely. You leave when it stops feeding your ego. But growth doesn't care about your ego. Finishing is humbling. It forces you to confront your limits. It forces you to admit you don't get instant results. It forces you to accept that mastery takes time. And a lot of people would rather start over than stay long enough to be exposed. Starting over feels powerful. Finishing feels vulnerable. Because when you finish, there's something to judge, something to evaluate, something that might fall short of your expectations. Instead of risking disappointment, you abandon the process early and protect your pride. But pride is expensive. It costs you progress. You don't need more starts. You need more stamina. You don't need more inspiration. You need more commitment. And commitment is deciding ahead of time that quitting is not on the table. Not when it's hard. Not when it's hard. Not when it's inconvenient. Finishing means you stop giving yourself escape routes. Every time you say, if this doesn't work out, you're already preparing to quit. Finishers burn the boats. They decide that this is it, that they'll stand long enough to see it through, even if it's uncomfortable, especially if it's uncomfortable, because discomfort is not a signal to stop. It's a signal that you're growing. Let me be clear. Finishing doesn't mean everything will work out perfectly. Finishing means you extract the lesson. You complete the process. You honor the commitment. Even if the outcome isn't what you imagine, you walk away stronger, wiser, and more disciplined. Quitters don't learn. They repeat. Finishers learn, then they level up. And here's something nobody tells you. Finishing one thing makes finishing the next thing easier. Discipline compounds, confidence compound, momentum compound. Once you prove to yourself that you can finish, you start approaching life differently. You stop doubting. You stop hesitating. You stop needing external motivation because you built internal credibility. But if you keep quitting, every new start feels heavier. Every promise feels shakier. Every goal feels less believable. Until eventually you stop setting goals altogether. Not because you don't want more, but because you don't trust yourself to follow through. That's a dangerous place to live. You don't need to do everything. You need to do something and finish the course. Finish the program. Finish the routine. Finish the plan. Not 10 things. One thing, stop chasing progress through variety. Chase it through consistency. And stop waiting for perfect conditions. Finishing is rarely convenient. There will always be reasons to stop. Life will always give you an excuse. The question is whether you're looking for progress or permission. Because permission is easy to find if you want to quit. Finishing requires boundaries. It requires you to say no to distractions, no to unnecessary commitments, no to people who don't respect your focus or focus. Because you can't finish what you start if you keep starting everything else. Scattered energy finishes nothing. Focused energy finishes everything. And finishing isn't loud. It doesn't need announcements. It doesn't need validation. It just happens quietly, consistently, daily. It's doing the next small step even when it feels insignificant. Those small steps don't look impressive until they stack. And one day you look back and realize the thing that once felt overwhelming is now complete. Not because you were extraordinary, but because you refused to quit. That's the difference. You don't need a new goal. You need to respect the old one. You don't need a new plan. You need to execute the one you already had. And you don't need permission to stop starting. You need courage to finish. Because the life you want is on the other side of follow through. You keep telling yourself you deserve comfort. You worked hard. You've been through a lot. You've earned a break. And listen, rest is necessary. But comfort is dangerous. Comfort is not neutral. Comfort is not harmless. Comfort is an enemy. And it doesn't announce itself like a villain. It sneaks in quietly, wraps itself in logic, and slowly talks you out of becoming who you're supposed to be. Comfort doesn't tell you to quit outright. It tells you to wait, to delay, to ease up, to take it slow. And before you realize what's happening, weeks turn into months turn into years. And the version of you that was hungry, focused, and relentless is now tired, distracted, and satisfied with less than your potential. Comfort kills urgency. When you're uncomfortable, you move. When you're uncomfortable, you adapt. When you're uncomfortable, you innovate. But when you get comfortable, you settle. You stop pushing. You stop asking more of yourself. You stop challenging your limits. And growth doesn't live where you're comfortable. Growth lives where you're stretched. Every level you want in life is guarded by discomfort. That next version of you doesn't live in your current routine. It doesn't live in your current habits. It doesn't live in your current mindset. If it did, you already be dead. The gap between where you are and where you want to be is filled with things you don't feel like doing. Comfort convinces you that staying the same is safer than changing, but staying the same is the biggest risk you can take. Because the world doesn't stand still. If you're not growing, you're falling behind. If you're not sharpening your edge, it's getting dull. Comfort doesn't preserve success, it erodes it. You didn't get here by being comfortable. Think about it. The moments that shaped you weren't easy. They weren't convenient. They weren't safe. They were uncomfortable seasons that demanded more from you than you thought you had. And you rose because you had to. But now that things are a little better, now that you found your rhythm, now that you know what to expect, you've lowered the pressure. You stopped demanding excellence from yourself. You've replaced hunger with routine. And routine without intention becomes complacency. Comfort tells you that you've done enough. Greatness asks, what else is possible? Comfort tells you to protect what you had. Growth asks you to risk it for what you could become. You can't chase greatness and cling to comfort at the same time. One will always cancel the other out. Comfort loves predictability. Same schedule, same habits, same conversations, same challenges. But predictability doesn't build resilience. It builds fragility. The moment something disrupts your comfort, you panic. You fold, you lose momentum because you haven't trained yourself to operate under pressure anymore. Discomfort trains you. It trains your mind to adapt. It trains your body to endure. It trains your spirit to persist. That's why discomfort feels threatening, because it forces growth, whether you like it or not. And let's be honest, comfort has made you lazy in places you don't want to admit. Lazy with your preparation, lazy with your standards, lazy with your effort. You still care, but not enough to be uncomfortable about it. You do just enough to maintain, not enough to transform. And maintenance mode is where dreams go to die slowly. Comfort also lies about time. It whispers you've got plenty of it. Plenty of time to start later. Plenty of time to get serious tomorrow. Plenty of time to clean it up eventually. But time doesn't slow down because you're comfortable. It accelerates. And one day you realize you've been comfortable for far too long. Comfort turns urgency into apathy. You stop feeling the pressure to move. And pressure isn't always bad. Pressure creates focus. Pressure creates clarity. Pressure reveals priorities. When you remove pressure, you remove the catalyst for change. That's why people only change when they're uncomfortable enough. When the pain of staying the same outweighs the pain of change. Right now, comfort is protecting you from that pain, but it's also blocking your breakthrough. You don't need more convenience. You need more challenge. And challenge requires you to willingly step into discomfort instead of waiting for life to force you there. Because make no mistake, life will force discomfort eventually. Law, failure, change, unexpected obstacles. You can either train in discomfort now or panic in discomfort later. Comfort makes you reactive. Discomfort makes you proactive. When you choose discomfort on your terms, you build strength. When discomfort chooses you, you scramble. And here's the part people don't talk about. Comfort is addictive. Once you get used to ease, effort feels excessive. Discipline feels extreme. Sacrifice feels unreasonable. You start labeling basic requirements as too much. Waking up early feels extreme. Training consistently feels extreme. Studying daily feels extreme. Not holding yourself accountable feels extreme. But those things aren't extreme. They're necessary. Comfort just shifted your baseline. Greatness requires a different baseline. Comfort also isolates you from growth-minded people. Because people who are pushing forward make comfort uncomfortable. Their discipline exposes your excuses. Their consistency highlights your inconsistency. And instead of rising, comfort encourages you to distance yourself. You stop listening. You stop showing up. You stop engaging. Not because they're wrong, but because they remind you of what you're avoiding. Comfort wants you surrounded by people who validate staying the same. Growth demands proximity to people who challenge you to do more. And here's the truth. Comfort will never ask you who you're becoming. It only asks how you feel right now. But feelings are temporary. Identity is permanent. Every comfortable choice you make is shaping a version of you that expects ease. And when life demands effort, that version struggles. Discomfort builds capacity. Capacity builds confidence. Confidence builds momentum. Comfort builds dependency. Dependency builds fear. Fear builds stagnation. You weren't designed to live on cruise control. You were designed to stretch, to strain, to struggle, and to strengthen. Muscles don't grow in comfort. Minds don't sharpen in comfort. Character doesn't develop in comfort. Comfort produces soft edges. Discomfort produces sharp ones. And sharp people cut through obstacles. You don't need to eliminate comfort completely, but you do need to stop worshiping it. Comfort is a reward, not a residence. You visit it. You don't live there. Live too long in comfort and you lose your edge. And once you lose your edge, everything feels harder than it should. Discipline feels exhausting. Challenges feel overwhelming. Opportunities feel intimidating. Not because they are, but because comfort made you weak in places you used to be strong. The hardest part about leaving comfort is that it doesn't feel wrong at first. It feels reasonable, logical, deserved. That's why so many people don't realize they're stuck until they're far behind where they should be. Comfort rarely ruins your life dramatically. It ruins it quietly. Yeah, one skipped effort at a time, one delayed decision at a time, one lower standard at a time, until the gap between who you are and who you could have been is impossible to ignore. Discomfort, on the other hand, feels wrong immediately. It's awkward, it's inconvenient. It stretches you past your preferences. but it's honest. It tells you exactly where you need to grow. That tension you feel when you know you should do something but don't want to. That's growth knocking. That's the edge. That's the moment that separates people who evolve from people who stagnate. Lean into it, because comfort will never make you proud of yourself. It will only make you relaxed. And relaxed is not fulfilled. Fulfillment comes from effort. Fulfillment comes from progress. Fulfillment comes from overcoming resistance as the doorway. You don't need a more comfortable life. You need a more meaningful one. And meaning is earned through struggle, through effort, through choosing a harder path when the easier one is available. Comfort offers you peace now and regret later. Discomfort offers you pain now and pride later. And every day, whether you realize it or not, you're choosing one or the other. You keep waiting for motivation like it's supposed to save you. Like one day you're going to wake up feeling unstoppable, focused, disciplined, ready to conquer everything you've been avoiding. And until that day comes, you keep postponing the work. Let me tell you the truth you may not want to hear. Motivation is unreliable. It's emotional. It's inconsistent. And if your life depends on it, your results will always be unstable. High performers don't live by motivation. They live by standard. Motivation asks, how do I feel today? Standards ask, what is required of me no matter how I feel? That's the difference. Motivation shows up when things are exciting. Standards show up when things are boring, hard, repetitive, and uncomfortable. Motivation is a spark. Standards are a system. Motivation is temporary. Standards are permanent. You don't need to feel ready to do what needs to be done. You need to decide what is acceptable and what is not in your life. Right now, your standards are too low. Not your dreams, not your goals, your standards. You say you want more, but you tolerate behaviors that guarantee less. You tolerate inconsistency. You tolerate excuses. You tolerate distractions. You tolerate quitting when it gets uncomfortable. And every time you tolerate what you know is in line with your future, you reinforce the gap between who you are and who you want to be. Standards close that gap. A standard is a line you don't cross. It's a non-negotiable. It's not based on mood, weather, energy, or circumstances. It's based on identity. If this is who I am, this is what I do. This is what I don't do. When you have standards, you don't debate yourself every morning. You don't renegotiate commitments daily. You don't waste mental energy deciding whether or not to show up. You already decided. That's freedom. Most people think standards are restrictive. They're not. Weak standards are restrictive. They keep you trapped in cycles of inconsistency and regret. Strong standards create structure, and structure creates freedom. Look at your life honestly. Where are you relying on motivation instead of standards? You work out when you feel like it. You eat right when it's convenient. You focus when you're inspired. You work hard when you're watched. That's not a system. That's gambling. And gambling with your future always costs you more than you expect. Motivation makes promises it can't keep. It tells you a tomorrow will be different. Standards say a tomorrow will be disciplined. Motivation says, I'll try. Standards say, I'll try. Shauna's emotional commitment structural. You don't rise to the level of your motivation. You fall to the level of your standards. And here's the part that stings. Your current results are a perfect reflection of your current standard. Not your intentions, not your intention, not your potential, not your circumstances, your standards. What you allow is what will continue. If you allow yourself to quit, you will quit. If you allow yourself to be late, you will be late. If you allow yourself to underprepare, you will underperform. Standards eliminate allowance, and standards are built in private, not public. They're built in moments when no one is watching, applauding, or holding you accountable. They're built when you choose the harder option simply because it aligns with who you want to become. That's integrity. Integrity isn't about morality alone. It's about alignment. It's about alignment. Doing what you said you would do even when there's no consequence for not doing it, especially when there's no consequence. Motivation can't build integrity. Standards do. Motivation is external. Standard, internal. Motivation needs music, speeches, hype, and energy. Standards need a decision. And once you decide, you execute regardless of how you feel. That's why disciplined people don't look emotional about their work. They're not waiting for excitement. They're honoring a standard. They're not arguing with themselves. They're following a code. You don't need more emotional intensity. You need more behavioral consistency. Standards simplify your life. They remove debate. They remove debate. They remove drama. When something aligns with your standard, you do it. When it doesn't, you don't. No justification needed. People without standards live exhausted lives because every decision is a fight. Every task is a negotiation. Every commitment is optional depending on how they feel that day. Standards remove that fatigue. That's why elite performers look calm under pressure. They're not rising to the moment. They're returning to the standard. Pressure doesn't break people. Lack of standards does. When things get hard, motivation disappears first. That's when standards take over. That's when identity matters. That's when discipline reveals itself. And don't confuse standards with perfection. Standards don't mean you never fail. They mean you don't stay down. They mean you don't make excuses. They mean you correct quickly and recommit immediately. Failure isn't the opposite of standards. Excuses are. Standards demand accountability, not punishment. Accountability, ownership, responsibility, the willingness to say, that wasn't aligned with who I'm becoming, and I'm correcting it. Motivation avoids accountability. It blames circumstances. It blames timing. It blames energy levels. Standards take responsibility. And here's why most people resist standards. Standards expose comfort. Once you set a standard, you can't hide behind potential anymore. You can't hide behind I could if I wanted to. You either met the standard or you didn't. There's no room for ego. Standards humble you, but they also empower you. Because once you live by standards, confidence stops being emotional. It becomes earned. You don't feel confident because you're hyped. You feel confident because you trust yourself. Because you know that no matter what happens, you will do what needs to be done. That trust is priceless. You don't need to believe in yourself more. You need to keep promises to yourself more. You need to keep promises to yourself more. And standards are how you keep those promises. Set a standard for how you show up when you're tired. Set a standard for how you respond to setback. Set a standard for how prepared you are. Set a standard for how much effort is acceptable. Not what's ideal, what's required. Standards are not goals. Goals are destination. Standards are behaviors. Goals are future-based. Standards are daily. You don't live in your goals. You live in your standards. And if your standards don't support your goals are fantasies. You say you want excellence, but do you have excellent standard? You say you want success, but do you have successful habits? You say you want growth, but do you have growth level, discipline? Desire without standards is frustration waiting to happen. Standards also protect you from yourself, from your moods, from your impulses, from your excuses. They act as guardrails when emotions are high or energy is low. That's why standards must be decided in advance, not in the moment. You don't decide to be disciplined when it's hard. You decide beforehand that discipline is who you are, and then you live it out. This is where identity shifts. You stop saying, I'm trying to be disciplined, and start saying, I don't miss. You stop saying, I hope I stay consistent, and start saying, I don't break promises to myself. Language matters because it reflects standards. You rise to what you demand of yourself. And the moment you stop chasing motivation and start enforcing standard is the moment your life stops being unpredictable. Your progress becomes inevitable. Your growth becomes consistent. Your results become repeatable. Not because you felt like it, but because you decided that this is the standard and you refuse to live below it. Taku's been chasing motivation like it's a missing ingredient. Like once you find it, everything will finally click. You keep thinking, if I could just feel more inspired, if I could just get my energy right, if I could just get in the right mindset, and while you're waiting on that feeling, life is passing you by. Let me be clear with you. Motivation has never been the thing that separates winners from everyone else. Standards do. Motivation is emotional. Standards are intentional. Motivation is how you feel today. Standards are who you are every day. The problem isn't that you don't want it badly enough. The problem is that you built your life around how you feel instead of what you require from yourself. And feelings are unstable. They change with sleep, stress, weather, mood, and circumstances. If your discipline depends on motivation, your progress will always be inconsistent. That's why you start strong and fade out. That's why you have bursts of intensity followed by long gaps of nothing. That's why you keep restarting instead of building momentum. Motivation gives you emotional spikes. Standards give you predictable behavior. And predictable behavior is what produces results. Standards are non-negotiables. They are rules you live by even when nobody is watching, even when it's inconvenient, even when you don't feel like it. A standard doesn't ask permission from your emotion. It doesn't care if you're tired, frustrated, bored, or uninspired. It says, this is what we do, period. You don't rise to the level of your motivation. You fall to the level of your standards. Every time, look at your current results. Not your intentions, not your excuses, not your potential. Your results, they are a direct reflection of the standards you're currently willing to tolerate. If you tolerate inconsistency, you'll live inconsistently. If you tolerate excuses, you'll always have one ready. If you tolerate half effort, you'll get half results. Standards remove tolerance. And most people don't like standards because standards remove loopholes. They remove escape routes. They remove the option to quit quietly and justify it later. Standards force honesty. Motivation lets you lie to yourself in a nice way. It says, I'm in a nice way. It says, I'll get back to it tomorrow. Standards say, oh, tomorrow doesn't matter. What did you do today? Motivation asks, do I feel like it? Standards ask, is this aligned with who I said I am? That's a completely different conversation. When you live by standards, you don't need hype. You don't need reminders. You don't need to convince yourself every morning. The decision is already made. You've already decided what kind of person you are and how that person behaves. That's power, because decision fatigue is real. Every time you debate whether or not to do what you know you should do, you drain mental energy. People who rely on motivation are constantly negotiating with themselves. People who live by standards execute automatically. They don't think, or should I show up today? They think, this is what I do. Standards turn discipline into identity, and identity is stronger than emotion. You don't like to argue with yourself about brushing your teeth. You don't need motivation for it. You don't wait to feel inspired. You do it because it's part of who you are. That's what standards look like when they're embedded. The goal is not to feel motivated. The goal is to make discipline boring and automatic. Most people want intensity. What they need is consistency. Standards give you consistency. Standards give you consistency, and standards aren't about being extreme. They're about being clear. Clear about what's acceptable and what's not. Clear about what you tolerate and what you refuse to tolerate. Clear about how you show up when things get hard. Because that's when standards matter most, anybody most. Anybody can work hard when they're excited. Anybody can show up when things are going well. Standards show up when things aren't. When you're tired, when you're discouraged, when results are slow, when nobody is clapping. Motivation disappears in those moments. Standards take over. That's why relying on motivation keeps you fragile. One bad day can derail weeks of progress. One inconvenience can knock you off track. One emotional dip can cause you to abandon the plan. Standards create resilience. You don't break under pressure when you have standards. You default to them. You fall back on them. They anchor you when emotions are high and energy is low. And here's something you need to understand. Standards are set in advance, not in a moment. You don't decide to be disciplined when it's hard. You decide beforehand. That discipline is non-negotiable. That decision removes drama from execution. People without standards make everything dramatic. They need pep talks. They need reminders. They need emotional buildup. People with standards just do the work. Not because they're superhuman, because they decided who they are. Standards also expose comfort. Once you set a standard, you can no longer hide behind, I could if I want to. You either met the standard or you didn't. That level of honesty makes a lot of people uncomfortable because comfort thrives in vagueness. Standards thrive in clarity. Vague goals feel good. Clear standards feel demanding. I want to be better is vague. I train 5 days a week no matter what is a standard. I want to be successful is vague. I show up prepared every single day is a standard. Vagueness protects your ego. Standards challenge it, and that's why most people avoid them. But if you want a different life, you need a different operating system. Motivation is not an operating system, it's a mood. And moods don't build legacies. Standards build legacies. They shape how you respond under pressure. They shape how you behave when nobody is watching. They shape how you treat your commitments to yourself. Every time you break a promise to yourself, you weaken self-trust. Every time you keep one, you strengthen it. Standards are how you protect that trust. And self-trust is everything. Confidence isn't built by positive thinking. It's built by evidence. And evidence comes from repeatedly doing what you said you would do. Standards create that evidence. You stop saying, I hope I stay consistent. You start saying, I don't miss. You stop saying, I'm trying. You stop saying, I'm trying. You start saying, and this is a standard. Language changes because identity changes. And once identity changes, behavior follows. Standards don't eliminate failure, but they eliminate excuses. When you mess up, standards don't let you spiral. They don't let you quit. They don't let you hide. They demand correction, not self-pity. You adjust, you recommit, you move forward. That's maturity. Motivation wants you to feel good about yourself. Standards want you to become someone you respect. And respect lasts longer than feeling. Standards also simplify your life. When you don't have standards, every decision is heavy. Every choice is exhausting. Every moment is a negotiation. That's why so many people feel overwhelmed. Not because they're doing too much, but because they're deciding too much. Standards remove the decision. You already know what's required. You already know what's acceptable. You already know what you do when it's hard. There's peace in that. People think standards make life rigid. They make life stable. They free up energy for creativity, focus, and growth because the basics are handled automatically. And the higher you want to go, the higher your standards have to be. Not your motivation, your standard. You don't rise by feeling better. You rise by demanding better of yourself. Demand better preparation. Demand better preparation. Demand better consistency. Demand better effort. Demand better follow through. Not perfectly, but reliably. Because the moment you stop waiting to feel motivated and start enforcing standards is the moment your progress becomes predictable. Your growth stops being accidental. Your success stops being dependent on mood and circumstances. You become someone who executes regardless. And that's when life starts responding differently to you. Not because you were inspired, but because you finally decided what the standard is and you refuse to live below it. You keep running from pain like it's a sign you're doing something wrong. Like discomfort means you missed the path. Like struggle means you're failing. Let me reset that thinking for you right now. Pain is not a punishment. Pain is the price. And if you're not willing to pay it, you're not getting the progress. Everything you want costs something. Growth costs discomfort. Change costs effort. Change costs effort. Improvement costs strain. And the problem isn't that pain exists. The problem is you were never taught how to interpret it correctly. You were taught to avoid it, escape it, numb it, distract yourself from it. But pain is information. Pain is feedback. Pain is proof that something is happening. No growth happens without resistance. Muscles don't grow without tearing. Minds don't expand without challenge. Character doesn't form without pressure. Yet somehow you expect your life to level up without anything hurting along the way. That's not how it works. Progress hurts because it requires you to leave what's familiar. It requires you to abandon old habits, old identities, old comforts. And your mind will fight that. Your body will fight that. Your emotions will fight that. Pain is the friction between who you've been and who you're becoming. And friction is necessary. If it didn't hurt, everyone would be evolving. If it didn't cost anything, everybody would be disciplined. If it didn't sting, quitting wouldn't be so tempting. Pain is the filter. It separates people who want change from people who just like the idea of it. You don't avoid pain by staying the same. You just choose a different kind of pain. There's the pain of discipline, and there's the pain of discipline, and there's the pain of regret. There's the pain of effort, and there's the pain of stagnation. There's the pain of growth, and there's the pain of knowing you could have done more. One hurts now, the other hurts later. But both hurt. The lie you've been sold is that comfort is not safe. Comfort is just delayed pain. It feels good now, but it charges interest. And one day that bill comes due, and missed opportunities weaken confidence, and a life that feels smaller than it should. Pain paid up front builds strength. Pain avoided builds fear. That's why people who never push themselves panic when life gets hard. They haven't trained for resistance. They haven't built tolerance. They haven't developed endurance. They spend so much time avoiding pain that when it shows up uninvited, it overwhelms them. But when you choose pain intentionally, when you lean into the hard work, the discipline, the discomfort, you're training yourself. You're building capacity. You're increasing what you can handle. You're expanding your limits. Pain is not the enemy. Weakness is. And weakness grows where pain is avoided. Let's talk about why pain feels so threatening to you. It's not because you can't handle it. You've handled pain before. You've survived things you didn't think you would. You've endured seasons that almost broke you. So it's not that you're incapable. It's that pain forces honesty. Pain exposes your habits. Pain exposes your priorities. Pain exposes your discipline. When you're in pain, excuses stop working. Stories fall apart. You can't hide behind potential anymore. Pain brings everything to the surface. And most people would rather stay comfortable than confront what pain reveals about them. But pain is a teacher. It teaches you where you're undisciplined. It teaches you where you're weak. It teaches you where you need to grow. And the people who progress are the ones who listen instead of running. You keep asking for progress without pain. That's like asking for strength without resistance, asking for wisdom without experience, asking for confidence without effort. It doesn't exist. Pain is the admission fee. And the longer you delay paying it, the higher the cost becomes. Here's the part nobody prepares you for. Progress doesn't hurt all at once. It hurts daily. It hurts in small ways. Early mornings, late nights. Saying no when you want to say yes. Doing the work when you're tired. Staying consistent when results are slow. That's the pain that most people can't tolerate. Not dramatic suffering, but sustained discomfort. Consistency hurts. And because it hurts, most people quit. They don't quit because they can't do it. They quit because they don't want to feel that discomfort anymore. They interpret pain as a signal to stop instead of a signal that growth is happening. But pain doesn't mean you're broken. It means you're stretching. Every rep hurts before it strengthens you. Every habit feels heavy before it becomes automatic. Every level feels uncomfortable before it feels normal. Pain is temporary. Adaptation is permanent, but only if you stay long enough. You don't get rewarded for avoiding pain. You get rewarded for enduring it. And let's be honest, you're already in pain. You're just choosing the familiar kind. The pain of frustration. The pain of self-doubt, the pain of inconsistency, the pain of watching others pass you by. That pain has become normal to you, so you don't question it. But normal doesn't mean acceptable. You've normalized pain that produces nothing and rejected pain that produces growth. That's backwards. Progress pain has direction. It has purpose. It leads somewhere. It's connected to something bigger than the moment. Comfort pain just keeps stuck in the same place, cycling through the same regrets. Pain with purpose is easier to carry than pain without meaning. When you know why you're hurting, you can endure almost anything. That's why people quit when they lose sight of the goal. The pain didn't change. The meaning did. The work didn't suddenly become impossible. It stopped feeling worth it. You don't need less pain. You need a stronger reason. Because pain will show up whether you chase your potential or avoid it. The only difference is what that pain builds. Pain faced builds resilience. Pain avoided builds fragility, and fragility breaks under pressure. That's why people who live soft lives struggle with hard moments. They haven't trained their tolerance, they haven't built grit, they haven't developed it to stay present when things hurt. Pain trains presence. When something hurts, you're forced into the moment. You can't coast, you can't drift, you're alert, you're engaged, you're aware. That awareness is where growth happens. But if you constantly escape discomfort through distraction, entertainment, excuses, or numbing habits, you never build that capacity. You stay mentally soft. Progress requires you to stay when everything in you wants to leave. Stay with the workout. Stay with the process. Stay with the routine. Stay with the discomfort. Not forever, just long enough for adaptation to occur. Most people quit right before adaptation. They leave while pain is still loud and growth is still quiet. But if you stay, something shifts. What once felt unbearable becomes manageable. What once felt heavy becomes normal. What once felt impossible becomes routine. That's how strength is built. Pain doesn't last forever. but it does last long enough to test your commitment. And commitment isn't proven when things feel good and when things feel good. It's proven when things hurt. That's why progress changes you at the identity level. When you endure pain intentionally, you start seeing yourself differently. You stop identifying as someone who avoids hard things. You become someone who can handle pressure, someone who doesn't panic when it's uncomfortable, someone who knows that pain is part of the process, not the end of it. That identity shift is powerful because once you stop fearing pain, fear loses its grip on you. You stop asking, oh, what if it's hard? You start asking, oh, what will it cost me if I don't try? You stop avoiding challenges. You start seeking them, not because you enjoy suffering, but because you respect growth. Pain doesn't make you weaker, avoidance does. Now, my irony is this. The pain you're most afraid of is usually the pain that will free you. The pain of discipline, the pain of honesty, the pain of effort, the pain of showing up consistently. Those pains don't destroy you. They refine you. They burn off excuses. They sharpen focus. They strengthen resolve. And yes, they hurt, but so does staying the same. The difference is one pain builds a future you're proud of, and the other builds a life full of what ifs. Pain is not a sign you should stop. It's a sign you should pay attention. Ask yourself, is this pain pulling me forward or keeping me stuck? If it's pulling you forward, don't run from it. Respect it. Endure it. Learn from it. Because progress always demands a payment. And pain is the currency. Been taught to see pain as a warning sign. Like the moment it shows up, you're supposed to stop, turn around and look for an easier route. Somewhere along the way, pain got labeled as failure, as weakness, as something to avoid at all costs. But that thinking is backwards. Pain isn't telling you that you're losing. Pain is telling you that you're paying. Nothing of value comes free. Every level costs something, and pain is the receipt that proves the transaction happened. You don't grow without resistance. You don't change without friction. You don't improve without strain. That's not punishment, that's process. And the sooner you accept that pain is part of the deal, the faster you stop wasting energy trying to escape it. The problem isn't pain. The problem is that you expected progress to be painless. You expected discipline to feel good. You expected consistency to feel natural. You expected growth to feel smooth. It doesn't. Growth feels awkward. It feels heavy. It feels inconvenient. It feels like you're doing more than you're getting back at first. And most people quit right there, not because they can't handle the pain, but because they misinterpret it. They think pain means that this isn't working, when really it means, oh, this is working exactly how it's supposed to. Pain is evidence of resistance, and resistance will create strength. Muscle doesn't grow when it's comfortable. It grows when it's stressed. When fibers are pushed past what they used to, torn down, and rebuilt stronger. Your mind works the same way. Your habits work the same way. Your character works the same way. No resistance, no adaptation, no pain, no progress. You don't become stronger by staying where it's easy. You become stronger by staying where it's hard long enough for your system to adjust. Hey, here's the truth most people avoid. Pain exposes you. When things hurt, excuses stop working. You can't hide behind potential. You can't hide behind potential. You can't hide behind motivation. Pain strips everything down to what's real. Your habits, your discipline, your priority, your commitment. That exposure is uncomfortable, and instead of facing it, most people run. They numb, they distract, they rationalize, they quit, not because the pain is unbearable, but because it's honest. Pain tells you where you're weak. It tells you where you've been inconsistent. It tells you what you've been avoiding. And if you're not willing to hear that message, you'll do anything to silence it. But silencing pain doesn't eliminate it, it just delays it. You don't avoid pain by choosing comfort. You trade one kind of pain for another. There's the pain of discipline, and there's the pain of regret. The pain of effort and the pain of stagnation. The pain of growth and the pain of watching your potential expire. One hurts while you're building. The other hurts when it's too late to fix, and regret is heavier than effort. Effort hurts your body and your ego. Regret hurts your identity. The pain of discipline says, this is hard, but it's making me better. The pain of regret says, this hurts because I didn't do what I knew I should. One pain has purpose. The other has shame. You can't build a strong life without developing a relationship with pain. Not a love for it, but a respect for it. You have to stop treating pain like an enemy and start treating it like a coach. A strict one, an uncomfortable one, but one that tells you the truth. Pain doesn't lie. When you're in pain, you know exactly where you are. You know what needs work. You know what's being challenged. Comfort hides those things. Pain reveals them. And here's something most people don't understand. Progress pain is rarely dramatic. It's not some big heroic suffering. It's small daily discomforts that stack up over time. Waking up earlier than you want. Sticking to the plan when motivation is gone. Doing the work when results are invisible. Saying no when you want to say yes. Staying consistent when nobody notices. That kind of pain doesn't look impressive. It doesn't get applause, but it builds something real. And because it's not dramatic, people underestimate it. They think, this shouldn't be this hard. But it is, because you're rewiring habits. You're breaking patterns. You're challenging years of conditioning. That hurts. Consistency hurts more than intensity. Anyone can suffer for a moment. Few people can endure discomfort daily. That's why so many people burn hot and fade out. They can handle short-term pain. They can't handle long-term discipline. They want progress without pressure, growth without grind, change without challenge. That combination doesn't exist. Pain is the toll booth on the road to progress. You don't get around it. You either pay it willingly or you turn around. And if you turn around, the road doesn't disappear. It just waits. And the longer you wait, the harder it feels to step back onto it. Pain also builds tolerance. The first time you experience discomfort, it feels overwhelming. Your mind panics. Your body resists. Everything in you wants relief. But if you stay, if you don't quit, something changes. What once felt unbearable becomes manageable. What felt heavy becomes normal. What felt impossible becomes routine. That's adaptation. Pain doesn't stay at the same intensity forever. You get stronger. Your capacity increases, but only if you stay long enough for that to happen. Most people quit while pain is still loud and growth is still quiet. They leave right before the shift, and then they tell themselves a story about why it wasn't for them. Well, really, they just didn't stay long enough to get past the uncomfortable part. Pain is temporary. Avoidance is permanent. Avoidance builds fragility. Teaches you that discomfort is dangerous. It trains you to retreat at the first sign of difficulty. And fragile people break under pressure. Not because pressure is extreme, but because they never train for it. Pressure exposes preparation. If you've been avoiding pain, pressure will feel like an attack. If you've been training through pain, pressure feels familiar. That's why disciplined people stay calm in hard moments. They've been here before. They know the feeling. They've learned how to breathe through it instead of panic. Pain trains composure. It teaches you how to stay present when things are uncomfortable, how to keep moving when everything in you wants to stop, how to think clearly when your emotions are loud. Those skills don't come from comfort. They come from experience, and pain gives you experience fast. You don't become resilient by reading about resilience. You become resilient by enduring discomfort and surviving it again and again until your nervous system learns, I can handle this. That confidence is earned, not imagined. You don't trust yourself because you think positively. You think positively? You trust yourself because you've been through pain and didn't quit. You stayed when it was hard. You've shown yourself that you're capable of enduring. That kind of confidence can't be shaken easily. But here's the reality you need to accept. Pain doesn't ask permission. If you don't choose productive pain, life will assign you unproductive pain. Loss. Disappointment, missed opportunity, unfulfilled potential don't make you stronger, they make you bitter. The pain of discipline strengthens you. The pain of neglect weakens you. One builds, the other erodes. You don't escape pain by avoiding effort. You delay it and often multiply it. And pain delayed is pain compounded. A little discipline now prevents a lot of regret later. A little discomfort now prevents a lot of frustration later. A little effort now prevents a lot of a why didn't I? Later. Pain is cheaper when you pay it early. The problem is early pain doesn't feel urgent. It feels optional. Later pain feels unavoidable. And by then, your options are limited. Pain also sharpens focus. When things hurt, distractions fade. You can't multitask pain. You can't half feel it. It demands attention. When directed properly, creates clarity. Pain forces you to ask better questions. What am I avoiding? What do I need to strengthen? What needs to change? Comfort never asks those questions. Comfort lets you drift. And drifting feels fine until you look up and realize how far off course you are. Pain keeps you awake. Comfort puts you to sleep. And sleeping through your own life is a quiet tragedy. You weren't built to live pain-free. You were built to adapt, to endure, to overcome. Pain is part of that design. It's not a flaw, it's a feature. The issue isn't that pain exists. The issue is that you've been taught to fear it instead of use it. Pain used correctly refines you. Pain avoided weakens you. And the more you respect pain, the less power it has over you. When you stop asking, how do I avoid this? And start asking, what is this building in me? Everything changes. You stop seeing pain as an obstacle. You start seeing it as a process, not something to run from, something to move through. Because on the other side of pain isn't just progress. It's pride, it's confidence, it's identity. It's knowing that when things get hard, you don't fold, you focus. Pain is not the enemy of progress. It is the proof that progress is being made. And once you accept that, pain stops controlling you and starts shaping you. You have weak days. Let's get that out of the way right now. Now, Mike, now maybe you will. Days where your energy is low. Days where your confidence is shaky. Days where your focus is off. Days where you feel behind, overwhelmed, unmotivated, and unsure of yourself. That's not failure. That's being human. The problem isn't that you have weekdays. The problem is you've been treating weekdays like a verdict on your future instead of a moment in your process. A weekday does not erase a strong goal. Feeling tired doesn't mean you're not disciplined. Feeling discouraged doesn't mean you're not capable. It just means you're not capable. Feeling off doesn't mean you're not called to what you're pursuing. It just means you're in a moment, not the end. Not the end. Not that you've been letting moments talk you out of missions. You wake up one day and don't feel like yourself, and suddenly you start questioning everything. The plan, the goal, the dream. You start replaying doubts you were never entertaining on your strong days. You let temporary weakness rewrite long-term vision. That's dangerous because emotions are terrible historians. They only remember what hurts right now. They forget why you started. They forget how far you come. They forget the progress you've already made. Weekdays shrink your perspective. On a weekday, everything feels bigger than it is. The work feels heavier. The distance feels longer. The obstacles feel permanent. And if you don't know how to think on weekdays, you'll make permanent decisions based on temporary feelings. Most people don't quit on their worst day because they truly want to quit. They quit because they believe the weakness they feel in that moment is who they are. It's not. It's just a day. You don't measure a life by one day. You don't define a mission by one moment. You don't cancel a calling because of a dip in energy or confidence. Strong goals require weekdays. They come with the territory. If you're pursuing something that matters, there will be days when you don't feel strong enough for it. That doesn't mean the goal is wrong. It means the goal is stretching you beyond what you're currently comfortable with. Weekdays are not a signal to stop. They're a signal to adjust your expectations, not your direction. Here's what weekdays are for. Maintenance, not momentum. Survival, not domination. Showing up imperfectly instead of disappearing completely. On weekdays, the goal isn't to be exceptional. The goal is to stay connected. You don't need to win the day. You need to not quit the day. But you've been treating weekdays like all or nothing moments. If you can't give 100%, you give 0%. If you can't be at your best, you don't show up at all. And that mindset is costing you more than you realize. Consistency isn't built on strong days. Anybody can show up when they feel good. Consistency is built on weekdays, the days where you show up tired, distracted, or discouraged and still do something. Something small, something imperfect, something honest. Strong goals don't require perfect days. They require connected days. And the people who succeed long-term aren't the ones who never feel weak. They're the ones who don't let weakness decide their identity. They don't say, I feel weak, so I am weak. They say, I feel weak today, so I'll move differently today, so I'll move differently today, but I'm still moving. There's a difference. Weekdays test your maturity. They ask whether you're committed to the outcome or addicted to the feeling of progress. Because on weekdays, progress doesn't feel rewarding. It feels forced, quiet, unsatisfying. That's where most people detach. They don't quit loudly. They fade quietly. They miss one day, then two, then a week, then they tell themselves they have fell off. When in reality, they just never learned how to stay connected during weakness. Strong goals require you to build systems for your weak days, not just plans for your strong ones. What do you do when your energy is at 30%? What do you do when your confidence is low? What do you do when your focus is scattered? If the answers are nothing, that's the gap. Because weekdays are not exceptions. They are part of the rhythm. You don't need a plan for when you feel unstoppable. You need a plan for when you feel human. Weekdays also expose unrealistic standards. Somewhere along the way, you convince yourself that if you're serious about your goals, you should always feel driven, locked in, and focused. That's not discipline. That's fantasy. Discipline doesn't mean you never feel weak. It means weakness doesn't make decisions for you. On weekdays, discipline looks quieter. It might look like doing less, but not doing nothing. It might look like shortening the workout instead of skipping it, writing 1 page instead of 10, studying for 20 minutes instead of 2 hours, showing up without pressure to perform. That still counts. Weekdays count. They count because they reinforce identity. They tell your brain, even when I'm not at my best, I don't disappear. And that identity compounds over time. The worst thing you can do on a weekday is judge yourself for being weak. That judgment turns a temporary state into a permanent narrative. You start saying things like, I'm just not disciplined. I'm just not disciplined. I always fall off, or this is why I never finish. No, this is why you need a better relationship with weakness. Weakness is not the opposite of strength. Avoidance is. Strength isn't built by pretending weakness doesn't exist. It's built by moving through it without letting it take control. Your goal doesn't need you to be strong every day. It needs you to be consistent over time. And consistency is not intensity, it's continuity. Weekdays also teach you humility. They remind you that progress is not about ego. On strong days, it's easy to feel confident, capable, even superior. On weekdays, you're reminded that you're still growing, still learning, still becoming. That humility is healthy. It keeps you honest. It keeps you grounded. It keeps you connected to the process instead of just the outcome. But if you let weekdays shame you, you miss the lesson. Weekdays are not proof that you're failing. They're proof that you're stretching beyond your current capacity. They show you where you need rest, where you need structure, where you need patience. They give feedback, and feedback is valuable if you listen without quitting. Here's something you need to hear clearly. Your future is not decided by your worst day. It's decided by what you do the day after. Do you spiral? Do you disappear? Do you give up? Or do you recommit? Strong goals survive weekdays because they're built on commitment, not emotion. You don't owe your goal perfection. You owe it persistence. And persistence doesn't mean pushing through weakness aggressively. Sometimes it means respecting your limits without abandoning your standards. There's a difference between rest and retreat. Rest is strategic. Retreat is emotional. Rest says, I'm recovering so I can continue. Retreat says, I'm stepping away because this feels uncomfortable. Weekdays often require rest, not quitting. But if you don't know the difference, you'll label quitting as self-care and call it maturity when it's really fear. Strong goals require discernment. They require you to say, today I don't have my usual energy, so I'll reduce the load. But I'm not abandoning the process. That's how you stay in the game. Weekdays also remind you that progress is not linear. You will not feel better every day. You will not see improvement every week. Some days will feel like steps backward. That doesn't mean you're losing ground. It means you're human in a long process. Growth has dips. Progress has plateaus. Discipline has fluctuations. Only people chasing illusions expect constant upward motion. Real builders expect resistance, and they plan for it. Weekdays are where resilience is trained. Not when everything is going right, but when you choose to stay engaged when it's not. Every time you show up on a weekday, you build a quiet kind of confidence. Not the loud, hype-driven confidence, but the deep confidence that's, I don't disappear when it's hard. That confidence doesn't come from wins. It comes from survival, and survival is underrated. You don't need to dominate every season. Some seasons you just need to endure. To stay consistent enough to make it to the next strong day, because strong days come back. Energy returns, focus sharpens, confidence rebuilds, but only if you didn't quit during the dip. Weekdays are temporary. Quitting makes them permanent. You don't throw away a destination because of bad weather. You adjust how you travel. You slow down. You take shelter. But you don't turn around unless you truly decided the destination doesn't matter. And your goal matters too much to let a bad day decide its fate. So stop letting weekdays rewrite your story. Stop letting tired moments speak louder than long-term vision. Stop expecting yourself to feel powerful every day. You don't need to be powerful. You need to be present. Present enough to take one step. Present enough to present enough to stay connected. Present enough to not quit on yourself. Strong goals aren't canceled by weekdays. They're proven by them. Because anyone can chase a dream when they feel strong. Only the committed stay when they feel weak. Talent gets celebrated, but it doesn't get sustained. It looks good on the surface. It turns heads early. It creates quick wins and fast praise. And because of that, people fall in love with it. They chase it. They rely on it. They build their identity around it. But talent by itself is fragile. It performs best when conditions are perfect, when energy is high, when confidence is intact, when pressure is low. The moment those conditions change, talent starts negotiating. Consistency doesn't negotiate. Consistency doesn't care how you feel. It doesn't wait for the right mood. It doesn't need applause to function. It just shows up again and again, doing the work whether anyone notices or not. That's why consistency beats talent every single time. Not because talent isn't real, but because talent is unreliable without discipline. Talent gives you a head start. Consistency determines how far you go. You've seen it before. The gifted student who didn't study. The natural athlete who didn't train. The creative mind who never finished anything. They had the ability. They had the spark. They had the potential. But potential is only impressive in conversation. It doesn't produce results on its own. Consistency turns ordinary actions into extraordinary outcomes over time. Talent skips steps. Consistency compounds them. And compounding is quiet. It's slow. It doesn't feel dramatic day to day. That's why people underestimate it. They're looking for breakthroughs, not build up. They want leaps, not layers. But real progress is layered. It's built through repetition, through routines that don't look impressive but create momentum. Consistency is boring, and it's power. Talent loves excitement. Consistency thrives in monotony. Talent wants variety. Consistency wants rhythm. Talent wants inspiration. Consistency survives without it. And when things get hard, talent often looks for a reason to stop. Consistency looks for a way to continue. The truth is, talent is optional. Consistency is not. There are people less gifted than you who are further ahead than you simply because they stay longer. They didn't quit when it stopped being fun. They didn't disappear when results were slow. They didn't let boredom convince them they were wasting their time. They understood something crucial. Progress doesn't respond to intensity. It responds to frequency. Doing something once at full effort feels good, but it doesn't change much. Doing something repeatedly at moderate effort changes everything. Talent burns bright and fast. Consistency burns slow and long, and life rewards longevity. Consistency builds trust with yourself and with others. Every time you show up when you said you would, you reinforce identity. You're telling yourself, I do what I commit to. That identity matters more than any natural ability. Talent might impress people once. Consistency makes people rely on you. And reliability opens doors that talent alone never will. Here's the uncomfortable part. Consistency exposes excuses. You can't hide behind potential when you're consistent. You can't say I could if I wanted to, because consistency asks you to want it every day, not just when it's convenient. That's why people cling to talent. It gives them an escape route, a way to protect ego. If they don't fully commit, they can always say they never really tried. Consistency removes that safety net. When you're consistent, results become honest feedback. And honesty is uncomfortable, but honesty is how you grow. Consistency also outlasts motivation. Motivation is emotional. It spikes and crashes. It depends on mood, environment, and external reinforcement. Consistency doesn't need hype. It runs on systems, on habits, on decisions made once and followed daily. You don't wake up every morning deciding whether to brush your teeth. You do it because it's part of who you are. That's consistency. And once consistency becomes identity, effort decreases. What once felt hard becomes automatic. What once required willpower becomes routine. Talent never reaches that point on its own. Talent without consistency stays theoretical. Consistency turns effort into infrastructure. That's why people who start behind often finish ahead. They're not relying on bursts. They're relying on blocks. Small repeated actions stacked over time. Consistency is patient. Talent is impatient. Talent wants results now. Consistency understands delay. And delay is where most people quit. They don't stop because they can't do it. They stop because they can't see it working yet. They don't trust the process because it's not flashy. It doesn't give immediate validation. Consistency requires faith, not in motivation, but in accumulation. You have to believe that what you're doing today matters even when it doesn't feel impactful. That showing up today is casting a vote for the person you're becoming, even if nothing changes externally yet. Talent wants recognition. Truly. Consistency wants alignment. Talent says, oh, look what I can do. Consistency says, oh, watch what happens if I don't stop. And eventually, consistency creates results so undeniable that talent looks irrelevant in comparison. Another thing people misunderstand, consistency doesn't mean perfection. It means persistence. It's not about doing everything right. It's about doing something regularly. Talent gets derailed by mistakes because it ties identity to performance. Consistency expects mistakes. It plans for them, it absorbs them and keeps going. Miss the day, consistency doesn't spiral. It resumes. Had a bad performance, consistency doesn't quit. It adjusts. It felt off. Consistency lowers the bar, not the standard. That flexibility is strength. Talent is rigid. Consistency is resilient, and resilience wins long-term gains. Consistency also builds skill deeper than talent alone ever could. Repetition sharpens technique. Routine exposes inefficiency. Daily practice reveals patterns that raw ability overlooks. Talent might give you a shortcut early. Consistency gives you mastery later. Mastery comes from refinement, not flashes. And refinement takes time. People often confuse boredom with stagnation. They think if it feels repetitive, it must not be working. But repetition is how systems learn. It's how muscle memory forms. It's how instincts are built. Consistency trains you even when you're not consciously improving. Talent needs constant stimulation. Consistency thrives in repetition. That's why consistent people don't panic when things slow down. They trust their systems. They know that if they keep showing up, progress will show up too. Maybe not today, but eventually. And eventually is powerful. Talent peaks early if it's not supported. Consistency keeps rising. Think about this. Talent often creates entirely a belief that things should come easily. When they don't, frustration sets in. Consistency creates humility. It teaches you that results are earned daily, not granted once. Humility keeps you learning. Entitlement keeps you stagnant. Consistency keeps you grounded. It forces you to confront reality as it is, not as you wish it were. And that realism is an advantage. You stop waiting to be saved by inspiration. You stop waiting to feel ready. You stop waiting for perfect condition. You just do the work. And work done consistently becomes power. Not loud power, quiet power. Quiet power, the kind that doesn't need validation. The kind that doesn't panic under pressure. The kind that doesn't disappear when things get hard. That's why consistency wins when talent gets tired. Talent gets tired of trying when it's not immediately rewarded. Consistency is already comfortable with delayed gratification. Talent wants excitement, opposite. Consistency wants results. And results don't care how gifted you are. They care how often you show up. Every system in life rewards consistency. Fitness, business, relationships, learning, trust, health. You don't get strong from one workout. You don't build trust from one promise. You don't master a skill from one burst of effort. You build all of it the same way. Repeated action over time. Now, talent might open the door. Consistency keeps it open. Talent might get you noticed. Consistency gets you respected. No, might start the race ahead. Consistency finishes it, and finishing is what matters. Because the world is full of people who could have been great. It's short on people who stay long enough to become it. At some point, you have to face a hard truth that changes everything. Nobody is coming to save you. No perfect moment is on the way. No person is about to show up and suddenly make discipline easy, clarity obvious, or effort optional. There's no rescue plan for the life you keep postponing. And that truth can feel heavy at first, but if you let it sink in properly, it becomes freeing. Because the moment you stop waiting to be saved is the moment you take your power back. Waiting is comfortable. It lets you delay responsibility without admitting you're avoiding it, and you're avoiding. You tell yourself you're being patient, strategic, or realistic, when really you're hoping circumstances will do the work your discipline hasn't done yet. You're hoping motivation will appear. You're hoping confidence will arrive fully formed. You're hoping someone will believe in you enough to make it easier for you to believe in yourself. But hope without action becomes a hiding place. Nobody is coming to give you permission. Nobody is coming to force you to commit. Nobody is coming to carry you through the parts that feel boring, lonely, repetitive, or hard. Those parts are yours. They always were. And once you accept that, something shifts. You stop scanning the horizon for help that isn't coming and start looking inward for responsibility that's been there the whole time. Most people don't fail because they lack ability. They fail because they're waiting for support to show up before they show up themselves. They want reassurance before effort, certainty before commitment, validation before consistency. But life doesn't work that way. Clarity follows action. Confidence follows evidence. Momentum follows movement, not the other way around. When you accept that nobody is coming, you start asking, who's going to help me? And start asking, oh, what can I do today with what I already have? And that question is powerful because it removes excuses. It puts the focus back where it belongs, on your choices. It doesn't mean you'll never get support. It means you stop depending on it. Support is a bonus, not a requirement. You don't need perfect conditions to begin. You don't need a cheerleading section. You don't need everyone to understand your vision. Most of the work that matters happens in silence anyway. In early mornings, late nights, empty rooms, unnoticed routines. The kind of work nobody applauds because nobody sees it. And that's where most people give up. Not because the work is impossible, but because it's invisible. They want proof that it's worth it before it pays off. They want recognition before results. They want someone to say, you're doing great, keep going, especially on days when they don't feel great at all. But those days are the test. If you need constant external reinforcement to continue, you've handed control of your life to other people's attention. And attention is unreliable. It comes and goes. It's conditional. It's distracted. You can't build a stable future on something that's unstable. Nobody is coming to push you out of bed. Nobody's coming to stop you from procrastinating. Nobody is coming to manage your time. Nobody is coming to protect your focus. Nobody is coming to make the hard choices for you, and that's not a tragedy. That's not a tragedy. That's reality. The tragedy is pretending otherwise, because pretending someone is coming keeps you passive, keeps you rehearsing instead of executing. It keeps you planning instead of building. It keeps you talking instead of doing. You don't need saving. You need ownership. Ownership is uncomfortable because it removes your excuses. It forces you to look at your results and admit they're connected to your habits, that your current situation isn't just something that happened to you. It's something you participated in, whether consciously or not. That realization stings, but it also empowers. Because if your choices help create where you are, your choices can also change where you're going. Nobody coming means you don't have to wait. You don't have to wait until you feel ready. You don't have to wait until you feel ready. You don't have to wait until you're confident. You don't have to wait until conditions improve. You don't have to wait until someone believes in you. You can start now, imperfect, unprepared, uncertain. And starting before you feel ready is often the only way readiness ever comes. People romanticize breakthroughs, but breakthroughs are usually preceded by long stretches of lonely consistency. Days where nothing dramatic happens. Weeks where progress feels slow. Months where doubt whispers louder than belief. And in those stretches, nobody shows up to drag you forward. That's where self-leadership is built. Self-leadership is doing what needs to be done without supervision, without pressure, without applause. It's choosing discipline when nobody's watching and accountability when nobody's checking. And that skill's more valuable than talent. Because talent can disappear under pressure. Skill built through ownership stays. Nobody coming also means nobody is coming to rescue you from your own patterns. If you keep avoiding discomfort, nobody will interrupt that cycle. If you keep numbing instead of addressing what's wrong, nobody will intervene. If you keep repeating the same habits and expecting different outcomes, nobody will stop you. You have to interrupt yourself. You have to be the one who says, this isn't working anymore. You have to be the one who sets new standard. You have to be the one who follows through. Waiting for external pressure to force change usually means waiting until consequences are severe. Health scares, financial stress, broken relationships, missed opportunities. By the time life forces change, the cost is higher. Choosing change early is cheaper. Nobody coming means you stop negotiating with your comfort. You stop saying, I'll do it when, and start saying, I'll do it when, and start saying, I'll do it because you said you would. Because your future depends on it. And yes, that's heavy, but it's also honest. Your future is not going to be built by inspiration alone. Inspiration fades. It spikes and crashes. Responsibility stays. The people you admire most didn't get rescued. They decided to stop waiting, to stop hoping, to stop postponing. They decided to carry themselves. And carrying yourself is hard. It requires mental toughness. It requires saying no to easy relief in favor of long-term reward. It requires doing the work even when nobody cares yet. But that's how something real is built. Nobody coming also strips away comparison. When you stop waiting for someone to save you, you stop watching how fast everyone else is moving. You stop measuring your timeline against theirs. You stop feeling behind because you realize everyone is responsible for their own path. Comparison thrives when you're passive. Focus thrives when you're responsible. And focus is what moves you forward. There will be moments when you wish someone would step in, when you feel overwhelmed, when you feel unsure, when you feel like you're carrying more than you can handle. Those moments don't mean you're failing. They mean you're stretching, and stretching feels uncomfortable by definition. You don't grow into responsibility by feeling ready for it. You grow into it by shouldering it anyway. Nobody coming also means you get to decide who you become. No one else gets to define your ceiling. No one else gets to define your ceiling. No one else gets to limit your effort. No one else gets to decide how seriously you take your own life. That's power. Scary power, but power nonetheless. And once you stop waiting, momentum starts to build. Slowly at first, almost imperceptibly. A habit here, a decision there, a boundary set, a routine followed. Nothing dramatic, nothing viral, nothing flashy. Just progress. And progress compounds when you stop outsourcing responsibility. You won't always feel strong. You won't always feel certain, but you don't need to. You just need to keep choosing action over avoidance. Because the truth is nobody is coming, but you are already here. You are already capable of taking the next step. You are already capable of making one better decision. You are already capable of showing up today. Not perfectly, not fearlessly, just honestly. And that's enough to start changing everything. There are people counting on you even if they've never said it out loud. Some of them watch you closely. Some of them watch quietly. Some of them don't even realize yet how much your actions shape what they believe is possible. But whether you acknowledge it or not, your effort reaches further than you think. Finishing isn't just about you. It never was. Somewhere along the way, you convinced yourself that your goals are personal, that quitting only affects you, that stopping early is a private decision. That's not true. It feels true when you're tired, but it's not true. Your consistency gives other people permission to stay consistent. Your discipline becomes a reference point. Your follow-through becomes evidence that commitment is real. When you don't finish, the message isn't silent. It echoes. People see patterns, not intentions. They don't hear what you meant to do. They see what you repeatedly do. And when you walk away from something you said mattered, it teaches others, especially those who trust you, that quitting is acceptable when things get uncomfortable. That's a heavy realization, but it's also a meaningful one. Because it means finishing matters more than motivation. It means follow-through has influence. It means your discipline has weight. Someone is watching how you handle frustration. Someone is watching how you handle boredom. Someone is watching how you handle setbacks. Someone is watching whether you stay or disappear. That someone might be your child or a sibling or a friend or a teammate. or a coworker, or someone who has never spoken to you but studied your behavior more than you realize. You don't have to be perfect to be influential. You just have to be consistent. Finishing what you start sends a message that effort is not conditional on excitement. That commitment doesn't expire when it stops feeling good. That responsibility doesn't vanish when things take longer than expected. That message matters, especially in a world full of unfinished things, unfinished goals, unfinished conversations, unfinished promises, unfinished healing. People are surrounded by examples of half-in and early exit. When you finish, you become rare, and rarity carries influence. Finishing for the people counting on you doesn't mean carrying pressure to perform at an unrealistic level. It means honoring the trust, spoken or unspoken, that others place in your word. When you say you'll do something and you see it through, you teach reliability, you teach integrity. You teach that words mean something. Those lessons last longer than any motivational speech. People don't remember how excited you were when you started. They remember whether you stayed. Your consistency creates emotional safety for others. When people know you'll follow through, they relax. They trust, they build with you, they depend on you. And that trust opens doors. Relationally, professionally, personally, that talent will never will. Finishing builds reputation. Not the loud kind, the solid kind. The kind that doesn't need explanation. And reputation is built in moments when quitting would have been easier. There will be days when the only thing pulling you forward is the awareness that stopping will let someone down. Those days matter. They're not weakness. They're connection. They remind you that your life isn't lived in isolation. Your habits shape other people's expectations of what's possible. When you finish something difficult, you show others that difficulty isn't disqualifying. When you stay committed through discomfort, you show others that discomfort doesn't mean failure. When you keep going without applause, you show others that purpose doesn't require recognition. Those lessons don't need to be taught directly. They're absorbed through observation. People learn more from what you do repeatedly than from what you say once. And finishing what you start reinforces a powerful identity, not just for you, but for those around you. It normalizes perseverance. It normalizes delayed gratification. It normalizes effort without immediate payoff. Luke Coble is still forming the sense of what adulthood leaders like. If you're inconsistent, they internalize inconsistency. If you follow through, they internalize follow through. That doesn't mean you can't rest. It doesn't mean you can't adjust. It doesn't mean you can't change direction thoughtfully. It means you don't abandon things impulsively. You don't disappear without closure. You don't quit simply because it got hard. There's a difference between discernment and escape. People counting on you can feel that difference even if they can't articulate it. Finishing also honors the sacrifices others have made for you. The time, energy, patience, and support that went into getting you where you are. When you quit casually, you minimize that investment. When you finish, you respect it. That respect doesn't require perfection. It requires perfection. It requires effort staying long enough to matter. And sometimes finishing is less about achieving the outcome and more about completing the process. Learning the lesson, building the habit, proving to yourself and others that you can see something through even when the excitement fades. Excitement is easy. Endurance is earned. The people counting on you don't need you to be extraordinary. They need you to be dependable. They need you to show that commitment isn't conditional on comfort. That kind of dependability builds stability, and stability is rare. Finishing also protects your future influence. Every time you quit early, you quietly weaken your own credibility, not just with others, but with yourself. You start to doubt your own promises. You hesitate before committing because you don't trust your follow through. That self-doubt leaks outward. But every time you finish, even imperfectly, you rebuild trust. You remind yourself that you can endure, that you can adapt, that you can keep going even when it's inconvenient. That self-trust is contagious. People are drawn to those who keep their word, especially under pressure. They feel safe around them. They want to collaborate with them. They want to build alongside them. Finishing doesn't just impact what you achieve, it impacts who walks with you. And sometimes the reason you need to finish isn't because the task is life-changing, but because the habit of finishing is. Habits don't discriminate. If you quit small things, you'll quit big things. If you follow through on small things, you build the muscle for bigger commitments. People counting on you might not care about the specific goal, but they care about the pattern. Patterns create expectation. Expectations create trust. Trust creates opportunity. Finishing what you start isn't glamorous. It's often quiet, lonely, repetitive, unseen. But that's exactly why it matters. Because doing what's right without applause is what makes it real. And when you feel tempted to stop, to rationalize, to explain away why it's okay to quit this time, remember this. Someone is learning from you in that moment. Learning how to respond to challenge. Learning how to interpret difficulty. Learning what commitment looks like in real life. You are teaching whether you intend to or not. Finishing doesn't require you to be strong every day. It requires you to be honest about your responsibility. Honest about the impact of your actions. Honest about the fact that your choices rippled outward and those ripples matter. The people counting on you may never say thank you. They may never acknowledge the example you set. They may never even realize why they believe what they believe. But your consistency will have shaped them nonetheless. That's not pressure. That's purpose. Purpose bigger than mood, bigger than convenience, bigger than comfort. Finish for the people who look to you as proof that effort matters. Finish for the people who need to see that discipline is possible. Finish for the people who will go further because you didn't stop early. And when you don't feel like finishing for them, finish so that one day you don't have to explain why you did. You've gotten very good at explaining yourself. So good that your excuses sound reasonable, logical, even responsible. They don't sound like excuses anymore. They sound like conclusions. And that's the danger. When excuses evolve into explanation, you stop questioning them. You stop challenging them. You stop realizing that you're negotiating with the very things that are holding you back. Negotiation sounds harmless. It feels mature. It feels like self-awareness. But most of the time, it's just avoidance in a nicer outfit. You don't say, I'm scared. You say, oh, now isn't the right time. You don't say, I'm uncomfortable. You say, I need to be realistic. You don't say, I don't want to do the hard part. You say, I'm just being strategic. And slowly, quietly, you lower the standard without ever admitting that you did. Negotiating with your excuses is dangerous because it happens internally. There's no argument, no resistance, no opposing voice, just you agreeing with yourself again and again until quitting feels justified instead of disappointing. That's how goals die. Not from one dramatic decision, but from a series of small compromises that feel harmless in isolation. You didn't quit. You just postponed, then postponed again, then adjusted expectations, then reframed the goal, then forgot what it originally cost you to care. Excuses don't usually tell you to stop completely. They tell you to slow down, to ease up, to wait, to protect yourself. And those suggestions sound reasonable, especially when you're tired. But discipline doesn't grow in comfort. It grows in moments where you don't let comfort make decisions for you. Every time you negotiate with an excuse, you reinforce it. You teach your brain that resistance works, that if it complains loudly enough, you'll back off. And once that pattern is set, it doesn't just show up for one goal. It shows up everywhere. You start negotiating workouts, then deadlines, then boundaries, then standards, then promises until discipline feels optional and effort feels conditional. Excuses are clever because they adapt to your values. If you care about health, they'll sound like self-care. If you care about excellence, they'll sound like high standards. If you care about balance, they'll sound like moderation. They rarely say, give up. They say, it's just not today. And a not today repeated often enough becomes a not at all. You don't lose momentum in one day. You lose it by repeatedly choosing relief over responsibility. And relief always feels justified in the moment. It feels earned. It feels deserved. But relief without boundaries turns into retreat. Negotiation creates loopholes, and loopholes destroy consistency. Once you allow yourself to negotiate, every hard moment becomes a debate. You wake up tired and ask, do I really need to do this today? You feel resistance and ask, is pushing myself actually healthy? You don't see immediate results and ask, is this even working? Those questions sound thoughtful, but they're usually asked at the wrong time. in the middle of discomfort, when your judgment is compromised. Discipline isn't about never questioning. It's about deciding ahead of time what questions are allowed to change your behavior. Some questions are strategic, others are emotional. And emotional questions asked in moments of fatigue rarely lead to strong decisions. When you negotiate with excuses, you give temporary feelings veto power over long-term goals. You let mood outweigh commitment, and moods are unreliable leaders. The truth is, most of the time, you already know what needs to be done. The debate isn't about clarity, it's about willingness. Excuses don't exist to inform you. They exist to protect you from discomfort. But discomfort is where growth lives. Every standard you want to uphold will eventually be tested by inconvenience. That test is not asking for perfection. It's asking for priority. It's asking whether this matters enough to act on even when it's not convenient. And if you negotiate in those moments, you quietly answer, not really. That answer compounds. The more you negotiate, the more you weaken your own authority. You stop trusting yourself. You hesitate before committing because you know you might talk yourself out of it later. You lower expectations to avoid disappointment. You aim smaller to avoid resistance. That's not growth, that's contraction. Strong people don't eliminate excuses. They stop listening to them. Excuses will always exist. There will always be reasons to delay, to soften, to step back. The difference is whether those reasons get a vote. Discipline is deciding in advance that some things are non-negotiable. Not because you always feel like doing them, but because you've already decided they matter. When something is non-negotiable, excuses don't disappear. They just lose authority. You hear them, but you don't obey them. Negotiation also blurs accountability. When you make exceptions constantly, it becomes impossible to tell whether you're adapting intelligently or avoiding intentionally. And that ambiguity protects ego but erodes progress. Clarity requires firmness. You can't build consistency on flexible standards. Flexibility feels kind, but without structure it becomes chaos. You end up reacting instead of leading yourself. And leadership starts with self-leadership. Self-leadership means setting rules for yourself and respecting them even when nobody is enforcing them. Especially when nobody is enforcing them. Negotiating with excuses is a form of self-betrayal. You're not lying to others. You're lying to yourself about what you're capable of handling. You underestimate your own resilience. You assume discomfort is dangerous instead of temporary. And every time you choose the excuse, you reinforce the belief that you can't handle hard things consistently. That belief becomes identity, but identity can be rewritten, not through affirmations, but through actions that contradict the old narrative. Every time you don't negotiate, you build evidence. Evidence that you can follow through. Evidence that discomfort doesn't control you. Evidence that your word matters. The evidence is powerful. It changes how you see yourself. And how you see yourself determines how you act. Negotiation also delays momentum. Momentum doesn't come from perfect condition. It comes from repeated action. And every time you negotiate, you interrupt the flow. You turn movement into a stop-and-go pattern that drains energy. Starting over repeatedly is exhausting. Consistency conserves energy. Negotiation drains it. When decisions are made once and followed many times, life gets simpler. When decisions are made every day, discipline gets harder than it needs to be. Decide once. Execute daily. That's how you reduce friction. Excuses love ambiguity. They thrive when standards are vague. So I'll try. I'll see how I feel. I'll do my best. So statements leave room for negotiation. They invite debate every day. I don't skip. Structure creates freedom because it removes decision fatigue. You're not asking yourself whether to show up. You already know the answer. Negotiation also teaches you to overvalue comfort. You start believing that ease is a sign you're doing something right, and discomfort is a sign something's wrong. But discomfort is often a sign that something is changing. If you negotiate every time discomfort shows up, you'll never stay in the process long enough to adapt. Growth requires staying when it would be easier to leave. Excuses will always tell you there's a smarter way, a better time, a gentler approach. Sometimes that's true, but most of the time, It's just fear dressed up as logic. Fear of failing, fear of being exposed, fear of committing fully and still falling short. Negotiation feels safer than commitment because it preserves the illusion that you could have succeeded if you really tried. But that illusion costs you the chance to actually succeed. At some point, you have to stop bargaining with the version of you that wants comfort and start honoring the version of you that wants more. You have to decide which voice gets authority. Not every thought deserves negotiation. Not every feeling deserves obedience. Discipline is not harshness. Not harshness. It's clarity. And clarity means knowing when discussion is over. You don't negotiate with gravity. You don't negotiate with time. You don't negotiate with consequences. And you shouldn't negotiate with the standards you know are necessary for the life you want. Because every time you stop negotiating with your excuses, you take one step closer to becoming someone who doesn't need to. Average feels comfortable at first. It feels safe. It feels manageable. It doesn't demand much from you. And because it doesn't demand much, it doesn't challenge you. You can live in average without confronting your fears, without testing your limits, without asking hard questions about who you are and who you could become. Average lets you blend in. It lets you explain away underperformance by pointing to how everyone else is doing. It gives you cover. But average has a cost that doesn't show up immediately. At first, average feels like balance, like realism, like maturity. You tell yourself you're being practical. You're not chasing unrealistic expectation. You're just doing what makes sense. And in the short term, that mindset brings relief. Less pressure, less risk, less discomfort. What it also brings is stagnation. And stagnation is quiet. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't hurt right away. It just settles in slowly, disguising itself as routine. Days start to look the same. Weeks pass without progress. Months go by without change. And because nothing is actively wrong, you convince yourself that everything must be fine. That's the trap. Average doesn't feel dangerous while you're in it. It only becomes painful when you've been there too long. Regret doesn't come from one bad decision. It comes from thousands of small, good enough choices stacked on top of each other. Choices to take the easier route. Choices to delay effort. Choices to lower standards just enough to stay comfortable. At the time, each choice feels harmless, reasonable, even. But time has a way of revealing the true cost. One day, you look back and realize how much time passed without meaningful growth. You realize how many chances you had to push harder, learn more, try again. And then, and that realization hits harder than any short-term discomfort ever could. Average feels good until you become aware of your unused potential. That awareness is painful because you can't unsee it. You can't pretend you didn't know better. You can't convince yourself that circumstances were the only reason you didn't go further. Deep down, you know the truth. You settled in moments where you could have stretched. That's where regret lives. Not in failure, but in restraint. Most people don't regret the times they tried and failed. They regret the times they didn't try at all. The times they played it safe. The times they chose comfort over courage. The times they convinced themselves that average was enough. Regret is heavy because it's personal. You can't blame it on anyone else. You can't externalize it. It's the weight of knowing you had more in you and didn't demand it from yourself. And regret doesn't show up loudly. It shows up quietly in moments of reflection. Late at night, during milestones, when you see someone else living a life that looks like the one you once imagined for yourself. When you realize that the distance between where you are and where you could have been was created by choices you made or avoided. Average teaches you to avoid risk. But avoiding risk also means avoiding growth. Growth requires friction. It requires discomfort. It requires moments where you're unsure, stretched, exposed. Average avoids all of that. It keeps you in familiar territory, doing what you already know how to do at a level you already know you can maintain. But familiarity doesn't build strength. It builds complacency. And complacency is addictive. The longer you live there, the harder it becomes to leave. Not because you can't do more, but because you've trained yourself not to. You stop believing that effort changes things. You stop expecting improvement. You lower the bar to protect yourself from disappointment. And that self-protection slowly turns into self-sabotage. Average also changes how you see time. When you're pushing yourself, time feels valuable, urgent. You're aware that every day matters. When you're coasting, time feels abundant. You assume you'll get to things later. That there will always be another chance, another season, another opportunity. But later is not guaranteed. Regret often sounds like this. I thought I had more time. Average steals urgency. And without urgency, priorities blur. You start putting things off that deserve your attention. Help. Relationships, dreams, skills. You tell yourself you'll focus on them when things slow down, when you feel more ready, when life is less demanding. But life doesn't get less demanding on its own. You either grow to meet the demand or you shrink your expectations to avoid it. Average feels good because it doesn't ask you to grow. But growth is what gives life depth. Without growth, experiences flatten. Achievements lose meaning. Days blur together. You may be busy, but you're not building. Active, but not advancing. And that's exhausting in its own way. It's tiring to live below your capacity. It drains you differently than effort does. Effort exhausts the body. Regret exhausts the soul. Average also affects your identity. Over time, you start to see yourself as someone who doesn't push too hard, doesn't aim too high, doesn't expect too much. You call it being grounded. But underneath that label is often fear. Fear of failing, fear of discovering your limits. So you never test them and untest them. Untested limits become assumptions. You assume you couldn't have done more. You assume it wouldn't have worked. You assume the outcome would have been the same. Those assumptions protect you from disappointment, but they also protect you from truth. The truth is, you'll never know what you were capable of if you never demanded it from yourself. That not knowing is one of the sharpest forms of regret. Average is seductive because it's socially acceptable. Nobody questions it. Nobody challenges it. You don't get criticized for being average. You don't stand out enough to attract judgment. You stay under the radar, but you also stay under your potential. In one day, when you want more, when the hunger finally breaks through the comfort, you may realize that years of average living have made the climb steeper. Not impossible, but harder than it needed to be. That's another cause. Skills neglected take longer to build. Habits avoided take longer to form. Confidence unused takes longer to recover. Average delays development. And delayed development creates urgency later in life when energy, time, and margin may be smaller. Regret often comes with a sense of urgency that arrived too late. You start wishing you had pushed earlier, taken risks sooner. Been more disciplined when it mattered. You realize that the discomfort you avoided then would have been much cheaper than the regret you're carrying now. Average also impacts how you influence others. When you settle, you normalize settling. You model comfort over courage. And while that might not feel significant in a moment, it shapes environments, teams, and cultures over time. People take cues from what you tolerate. When you tolerate average, you teach it. And later, when you want more from yourself or others, you may find resistance where encouragement once could have lived. Regret isn't just about what you did achieve. It's about the version of yourself you didn't become, the discipline you didn't become, the resilience you didn't develop, the confidence you didn't earn. Those things are built through challenge, not comfort. Average postpones challenge, and postponed challenge doesn't disappear. It accumulates. Eventually, life will demand growth. And when it does, you'll either be prepared or overwhelmed. Average prepares you for neither success nor struggle. It prepares you for stagnation. The good news is this: regret only exists because awareness exists. The fact that you can feel, it means you can still choose differently. But the longer you stay in average, the louder regret becomes and the harder it is to ignore. Average whispers, "We're fine." Regret shouts, "So you could have been more." One speaks now, the other speaks later, and later is always louder. Choosing to rise above average doesn't mean chasing perfection. It means refusing to settle for comfort when growth is available. It means holding yourself to standards that stretch you, not because you hate where you are, but because you respect where you could go. The discomfort of effort passes. The discomfort of regret lingers. Average feels good until it doesn't. And when it stops feeling good, it often feels unbearable. Because by then, you're not just facing where you are, you're facing where you could have been. And that comparison is brutal. So the question isn't whether average is acceptable today. The question is whether you're willing to live with its consequences tomorrow, because tomorrow always comes. And it remembers every choice you made today. Talent looks impressive when everything is going right. When energy is high, conditions are favorable, and confidence is intact, talent shine. It makes things look easy, creates moments that get noticed. It earns praise early. But talent has a weakness that rarely gets talked about. Gets tired, not physically tired, emotionally tired. Tired of pressure, tired of repetition, tired of not being immediately rewarded. Obsession doesn't get tired the same way. Obsession is not excitement. It's not hype. It's not a burst of motivation that fades when things get hard. Obsession is dip. It's focus. It's a long-term attachment to an outcome that doesn't depend on mood. Talent performs when it's convenient. Obsession shows up when it's inconvenient. And that's where the difference is made. Talent wants to feel inspired. Obsession doesn't wait for inspiration. It creates structure around the mission. It rearranges life. It prioritizes. It sacrifices. It makes the goal non-negotiable. That's why obsession beats talent when talent gets tired. Because talent eventually asks, is this worth it? Obsession already decided. Most people overestimate talent and underestimate obsession because talent is visible and obsession is private. You can see talent in a moment. You can't see obsession in a single performance. You see it in patterns, in repetition, in how someone lives when nobody's watching. Obsession doesn't look impressive on day one. It looks extreme, unbalanced, excessive. People question it. They suggest moderation. They worry about burnout. But obsession isn't about intensity without direction. It's about sustained focus with purpose. Talent relies on ability. Obsession relies on identity. When something becomes part of who you are, not just what you do, you don't need constant motivation to maintain it. You don't negotiate with it. You don't drop it when it becomes uncomfortable. You protect it. Talent often depends on confidence. When confidence dips, performance dips. Obsession doesn't collapse under doubt. It expects doubt. It plans for it. It continues anyway. That's a critical difference. Doubt stops talent because talent is tied to performance. Obsession continues because it's tied to commitment. Talent says, I'm good at this. Obsession says, this matters to me. And when things matter deeply, effort becomes durable. Obsession doesn't need to feel good every day. It needs to feel necessary. That necessity is what keeps people going when progress slows, when feedback is negative, when results don't match effort yet. Talent struggles in those phases because it expects return on investment quickly. Obsession accepts delayed returns as part of the process. Delayed gratification is obsession's strength. Talent wants payoff. Obsession wants progress. Progress isn't always rewarding in the short term. When talent gets tired, it starts protecting itself. It pulls back to preserve ego. It avoids situations that might expose limits. It stops pushing into discomfort. It stays where it can still look good. Obsession doesn't care how it looks. It cares how it grows. That willingness to look bad, to fail publicly, to struggle openly. That's where obsession separates itself. It's not trying to impress. It's trying to improve. And improvement requires repetition. Talent can get you through early stages quickly. Obsession gets you through plateaus. And plateaus are where most people quit. Plateaus are boring. They don't feel like progress. They don't give feedback. Talent gets restless. They wants movement. Obsession stays. Staying is the skill. Obsession also changes how you use time. Talent shows up when it's scheduled. Obsession looks for extra space. It finds pockets. It studies when others rest. It practices when others pause. Not out of pressure, but out of pull. The pull matters. Obsession isn't forced. It's chosen. It's the internal drive that says, I need to understand this deeper. I need to get better. I need to see how far I can take this. That drive doesn't shut off when things get hard. It sharpens. Talent dulls under pressure. Obsession sharpens. Pressure exposes what you're relying on. If you're relying on talent, pressure feels threatening. If you're relying on obsession, pressure feels clarifying. It tells you what matters. It strips away distraction. It focuses effort. Obsession simplifies life. It removes options. And removing options is powerful because it reduces indecision. You stop debating whether to show up. You already know the answer. Talent debates. Obsession commits. Another truth people avoid, obsession doesn't require talent to start. It creates skill over time. Repetition builds competence. Focus builds understanding. Consistency builds mastery. Talent without obsession peaks early. Obsession without talent keeps rising. And in long games, rising beats peaking. Obsession also tolerates discomfort better. It expects it. It understands that discomfort is part of the cost. Talent often resists discomfort because it contradicts the identity of being good. Obsession isn't threatened by being bad at something. It's motivated by it. That mindset changes everything. When you're obsessed, failure doesn't feel like a verdict. It feels like information, feedback, data. Something to study, not something to run from. Talent avoids failure because it undermines confidence. Obsession analyzes failure because it improves strategy. That learning loop compounds. Over time, obsession builds something talent can't replicate: resilience. The ability to stay engaged when outcomes are uncertain. Resilience is what carries people through long-term pursuits. It's what allows effort to continue when results lag behind. Talent often assumes results should come easily. Obsession understands they come eventually. That understanding creates patience, and patience outlasts talent. Obsession also changes how you define success. Talent defines success by recognition. Obsession defines success by progress toward the mission. Recognition becomes secondary. That internal metric keeps obsession moving even when nobody is watching. Talent needs applause. Obsession needs alignment. Obsession needs alignment. Alignment between action and purpose. When your actions align with what you care deeply about, effort becomes sustainable. You're not forcing yourself. You're expressing yourself. That's why obsession doesn't burn out the same way talent does. Burnout comes from doing things that don't align with your values for too long. Obsession is fueled by alignment. People confuse obsession with imbalance because they see sacrifice. But sacrifice doesn't equal dysfunction. Sacrifice with purpose is focus. Talent spreads effort across many things. Obsession concentrates it. Concentration creates power, and power counts. Eventually, obsession produces results that look like talent to outsiders. People say, oh, they're just gifted, without seeing the years of repetition, study, and persistence that built that gift. Obsession hides in plain sight. It's early mornings, late nights, boring reps, unseen adjustments, repeated failures. Talent skips those stages when possible. Obsession embraces them. That's why obsession wins when talent gets tired. Because obsession wasn't relying on feeling good in the first place. It was relying on meaning. Meaning carries weight. Meaning endures fatigue. Meaning survives doubt. Talent shines. Obsession lags. This season is asking something different from you. Not more intention, not more playing, not more talking. It's asking for sacrifice. And sacrifice doesn't announce itself politely. It interrupts. It inconveniences. It demands trade-offs you'd rather not make. That's why most people avoid it, not because they don't want success, but because they don't want to give up what success costs. Every meaningful season requires something to be laid down. Time, comfort, ease, distractions, certain relationships, certain habits, certain versions of yourself. You can't keep everything and still move forward. Growth always asks for an exchange, and if you try to cheat that exchange, you stall. This season isn't about doing everything. It's about doing the right things at the expense of the easy things. And that feels uncomfortable because it forces you to confront what you've been prioritizing by default. Sleep feels good. Scrolling feels good. Comfort feels good. Familiar routines feel good. But feeling good is not the same as moving forward. There are seasons where rest is necessary. And then there are seasons where rest becomes avoidance. This is one of those seasons where the line matters. Because what you call rest may actually be resistance. You don't need to be exhausted to be sacrificing. Sacrifice isn't about destroying yourself. It's about intentionally reallocating energy, choosing where your effort goes instead of letting it leak everywhere. This season doesn't need you well rested. It needs you well directed. Too many people sleep through opportunities and then wonder why nothing changes. Not because sleep itself is wrong, but because it's being used to escape the demands of the moment. You can't outrest a lack of discipline. You can't recover your way into results. Some seasons require late nights. Some require early mornings. Some require saying no when you rather say yes. Some require being misunderstood while you're building. That's not imbalance. That's focus. Focus always looks extreme to people who aren't committed to the same goal. They'll tell you to slow down, to take it easy, to enjoy life, to be realistic, but they're not living with your vision. They're not carrying your responsibility. They're not answering to your future. You are. And your future doesn't care how comfortable you were. It cares what you built. This season requires you to stop confusing exhaustion with effort. You can be busy and still avoid the work that matters. You can be tired from everything except progress. Sacrifice means cutting what drains you without giving you momentum. It means asking hard questions. What am I doing that doesn't move me forward? What am I protecting that's costing me growth? What comforts am I hiding behind? Those questions hurt because the answers implicate you. Sacrifice also means letting go of the version of life where everything fits neatly, where goals coexist peacefully with indulgence, where progress doesn't demand disruption. That version doesn't exist. Every breakthrough season feels chaotic at first. Your routine gets disrupted, your social life shifts, your energy feels stretched. That discomfort isn't a sign you're doing something wrong. It's a sign you're reallocating. You're moving resources from pleasure to progress. And that always feels like loss before it feels like gain. This season is not about balance, it's about alignment. Balance says everything gets some attention. Alignment says other right things get priority. And priority means some things don't make the cut. That's painful, especially when those things are enjoyable. But enjoyment without direction turns into stagnation. And stagnation quietly erodes confidence. You don't feel fulfilled because you're entertained. You feel fulfilled because you're advancing. Sacrifice creates advancement. You don't need to sleep less forever. You don't need to grind endlessly. But you do need to recognize when comfort has overstayed its welcome, when ease has become an excuse, when rest has become retreat. This season is asking you to lean in, not because you're broken, but because you're capable. Capable of more focus, capable of more discipline, capable of carrying more responsibility. But capability means nothing if it's not activated. Sacrifice activates potential. Potential stays theoretical until it costs you something. This is also the season where loneliness might show up, when your schedule doesn't match everyone else's, when your priorities don't align, when you're building while others are relaxing. That loneliness is not punishment. It's space to concentrate, space to think, space to become. You don't grow into something new surrounded by constant noise. Growth requires silence. And silence often looks like isolation before it looks like mastery. This season might require you to be misunderstood. People may assume you're doing too much, caring too much, pushing too hard. Let them. You're not here to be understood. You're here to be effective. Effectiveness requires sacrifice, clarifies identity. You find out who you are when you don't have the option to do everything you want. When you have to choose, when something has to give. What you give up reveals what you value. If you always give up progress, comfort is your value. If you give up comfort, progress is your value. That choice defines your trajectory. This season also requires you to stop romanticizing ease. Easy seasons don't build strength. They maintain it at best. Strength is built when you're stretched, when you're challenged, when you're asked to show up even when it's inconvenient. And inconvenience is the price of growth. You don't accidentally become disciplined. You don't drift into excellence. You don't drift into excellence. You don't stumble into finishing. Those outcomes are built intentionally through repeated sacrifices that don't get celebrated in the moment. No one claps for the nights you went to bed earlier to wake up focused. No one applauds the weekends you stayed in to get ahead. No one praises the discipline you exercised when nobody was watching. But those moments matter more than the visible wins. This season is also about urgency, not panic, but awareness. Awareness that time is moving whether you're ready or not. Awareness that waiting for perfect conditions is another form of delay. Awareness that the window you're in won't stay open forever. Urgency sharpens choices. When time feels abundant, you drift. When time feels valuable, you decide. This season is asking you to decide. Decide what matters. Decide what can wait. Decide what must go. Sacrifice doesn't mean deprivation forever. It means investment now. It means planting when others are consuming. It means building when others are coasting. And yes, it's tiring. But there's a difference between being tired from avoidance and being tired from progress. One drains you, oh, That season requires you to stop asking, what do I feel? And start asking, what does this season demand? Because seasons don't care about preference. They care about preparation. If you meet a demanding season with comfort, you fall behind. If you meet it with sacrifice, you grow into it. You don't rise to the level of your goals. You rise to the level of your sacrifices. And when this season passes, because it will, you won't regret what you gave up. You'll regret what you didn't lean into. You won't say, I've rested more. You'll say, I've rested more. You'll say, I've taken it seriously. This season is not asking for perfection. It's asking for commitment. Not endless grind. Focused sacrifice. Not burnout intentional pressure. Pressure that shapes you. Pressure that sharpens you. Pressure that prepares you. This is a season where comfort costs too much. And sacrifice finally makes sense. And in any pursuit that matters, lasting is what decides who finishes. You don't get results because you want them. Wanting is cheap. Wanting costs nothing. Wanting lets you feel productive without being effective. It gives you the illusion of movement while you stay exactly where you are. Everybody wants something. Everybody has dreams. Everybody has a vision of a better future. That's not what separates people. What separates people is what they are willing to do consistently when wanting is no longer exciting. Results don't respond to desire. They respond to behavior. You can want success every single day and still live in the same place year after year if your actions don't change. Wanting doesn't create momentum. Wanting doesn't build skill. Wanting doesn't compound. Work does. And work is not what people post about. It's not what looks good. It's not what gets immediate validation. Work is repetitive. It's boring. It's uncomfortable. It's showing up when nothing dramatic happens. Most people don't fail because they lack ambition. They fail because they underestimate how ordinary the process actually is. They expect results to match their level of desire, but results match your level of execution. Execution doesn't care how motivated you are. It doesn't care how inspired you feel. It cares what you do repeatedly. It cares about systems, habits, choices made when nobody is watching. That's why so many people feel frustrated. They're emotionally invested, but behaviorally inconsistent. They want outcomes without committing to the daily inputs. But life doesn't reward intention. It rewards alignment. Alignment between what you say you want and what you actually do. If your actions don't match your goals are just preferences, and preferences don't produce results. Work is uncomfortable because it exposes gaps. Gaps in skill. Gaps in skill. Gaps in focus. Wanting lets you avoid those gaps. Work forces you to confront them. That confrontation is where growth happens. But growth doesn't feel like winning at first. It feels like struggling, like being behind, like realizing you're not as good as you thought you were. Wanting protects your ego. Work challenges it. That's why people retreat back into wanting. It's safer. It's cleaner. It doesn't threaten identity. But safety doesn't build anything. You don't get results by feeling ready. You get results by acting before you feel ready and learning in motion. Readiness is a myth people use to delay discomfort. Work doesn't wait for readiness. It creates it. Every skill you admire exists because someone worked through incompetence. Every outcome you respect exists because someone kept showing up through uncertainty. They didn't wait to feel confident. They worked until confidence had evidence. Results are earned in moments that feel insignificant. One rep, one page, one conversation, one adjustment, one decision to show up again. Those moments don't feel powerful individually, but they accumulate. Work compounds. Wanting doesn't. That's a hard truth because wanting feels so real. It feels emotional. It feels emotional. It feels intense. You can visualize outcome. You can talk about plans. You can feel passionate and still not move an inch closer. Passion without discipline is noise. Discipline turns effort into structure. Structure turns effort into progress. Work also reveals priorities. You can say something matters, but your calendar and habits tell the truth. Results show up where time and energy go consistently. If you don't like your results, don't interrogate your desire. Interrogate your routines. Routines don't lie. People often say they're working hard, but effort without direction is just motion. Work that produces results is intentional. It's focused. It targets weaknesses. It builds leverage over time. That kind of work requires honesty. Honesty about what you avoid. Honesty about where you're undisciplined. Honesty about what you've been blaming instead of fixing. Results don't come from blaming circumstances. They come from adjusting behavior within circumstances. That's empowering and uncomfortable at the same time. Empowering because it puts control back in your hands. Uncomfortable because it removes excuses. When you accept that results come from work, not wishes, you also accept responsibility. Responsibility means you can no longer wait for permission, perfect timing, or external validation. You become accountable to outcomes, not emotions. That shift changes how you operate. You stop asking, do I feel like it? You start asking to just move me forward. Some days the answer is yes, and you do the work. Some days the answer is still yes, and you do the work anyway. Because work doesn't negotiate with mood. Mood changes, standards hold. Results are built by standards. Standards about how you show up when it's boring. Standards about how you respond when it's hard. Standards about how you recover when you mess up. Work isn't perfection, it's persistence. People think results require flawless execution. They don't. They require continued execution. Messy, imperfect, adjusted execution. Wanting tends to romanticize outcomes. Work forces you to deal with process. And process is humbling. It strips away fantasy and replaces it with facts. Facts like, this takes longer than you thought. This is harder than you expected. This requires more consistency than you planned for. Those facts discourage people who rely on motivation. They strengthen people who rely on discipline. Because discipline doesn't promise quick results. It promises eventual results. And eventual results are the ones that last. Work also demands patience. Not passive patience, active patience. The kind where you keep doing the work even when feedback is slow, even when results lag, even when progress feels invisible. Invisible progress is still progress. Wanting wants evidence quickly. Work trusts the process. That trust isn't blind. It's built through repetition, through seeing small improvements stack up, through learning how effort translates into outcome over time. That learning creates confidence rooted in experience, not hype. Results also don't care about fairness. They don't adjust for effort the way you wish they would. You don't get partial credit for trying. You get outcomes based on execution. That's not harsh, it's honest. And honesty is useful. Because once you stop expecting life to reward desire, you stop feeling entitled to outcomes you haven't earned. You stop being surprised when things don't work. You start asking better questions. What can I do differently? Or what skill am I missing? Or what habit is holding me back? Those questions lead to work, and work leads to results. People who get consistent results aren't always the most talented or passionate. They're the most committed to doing the work even when it's inconvenient. They don't wait for clarity. They work their way into clarity. They don't wait for confidence. They work their way into confidence. They don't wait for momentum. They work until momentum shows up. Momentum is not the cause of work. It's the result of it. And once momentum exists, one, it becomes irrelevant. The system carries you. Habits pull you forward. Identity shifts from someone who wants to someone who does. That identity is powerful because when you see yourself as someone who works, not someone who wishes, your decisions change. You choose effort more often. You tolerate discomfort longer. You tolerate discomfort longer. You recover from setbacks faster. Results become predictable. Not guaranteed, but predictable. Because consistent input produces consistent output over time. That's the difference. You don't get results you want. You get results you work for. And that truth is either discouraging or freeing, depending on how you receive it. If you want shortcuts, it's discouraging. If you want control, it's freeing. Because work is always available. No matter your background, no matter your starting point, no matter your past failure, you can work today. You can make one better choice. You can take one disciplined action. You can show up once more. And those small acts repeated reshape your trajectory. One, and keeps you stuck in the future. Work anchors you in the present. And the present is the only place results are built. Every outcome you admire was built there quietly, consistently, without guarantees, not by wishing harder, but by working longer.